Hey guys, tonight we're strapping on our metaphorical ancient sandals and embarking on a truly epic journey, not to some forgotten tomb filled with booby traps. Though, let's be honest, ancient libraries probably had their own kind of booby traps, like, say, a rogue scroll falling on your head. No, tonight we're setting sail, or perhaps trundling along a dusty road, towards a place that whispered promises of knowledge across the ancient world. The legendary Library of Alexandria. You're about to step into a time when parchment was precious, ink was handmade, and the internet was, well, pretty much non-existent, which means you probably won't survive this without a severe case of historical FOMO. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel it, don't you? That subtle shift in the air, the tang of salt mixed with something exotic and new, as your vessel, a sturdy merchant ship named something delightfully uncreative like the Sea Serpent or the Lucky Dolphin, finally nudges towards the bustling docks of ancient Alexandria. For weeks, you've endured the rhythmic creak of timbers, the relentless sway of the Mediterranean, and the questionable culinary delights of shipboard life. Forget your memory foam mattress. This was more like memory of pain foam, especially when an unexpected squall decided to redecorate the deck with your breakfast. But every cramped night, every salty morning, every moment of mild existential dread was worth it. Because at the end of this journey lies it, the library. The city itself rises from the azure waters like a dream made real, a testament to Hellenistic ambition. Sunlight glints off white marble and painted stucco, a dazzling kaleidoscope against the deep blue sky. As the ship is skillfully maneuvered into its berth, the clamor of the port assaults your senses. It's a symphony of sounds. The shouts of dockworkers, the bleating of tethered goats, the rhythmic clang of hammers, and the multilingual babble of traders from every corner of the known world. You catch snippets of Greek, Egyptian, Aramaic, Latin, a veritable babble of commerce and human endeavor. The smells are just as potent. Dried fish mingling with exotic spices, the earthy scent of unwashed humanity, and just a hint of something vaguely unpleasant wafting from the nearby canals. Ah, aromatherapy, ancient style. You wrinkle your nose subtly, a small, involuntary protest against the raw, unfiltered reality of an ancient metropolis. Stepping onto the solid stone quay, your legs feel a little like jelly after so long at sea, but the vibrancy of the city quickly dispels any lingering fatigue. You're just another face in the crowd, a scholar, perhaps a little disheveled from travel, carrying little more than a modest satchel of personal effects and a head full of dreams. You've come from afar, from a quiet corner of the world where dusty scrolls were rare treasures, not the very bedrock of existence. The pull towards this city, towards its intellectual heart, has been irresistible, a siren song sung not by mythical creatures, but by the promise of unparalleled knowledge. Alexandria, you instantly realize, isn't just a city, it's a living, breathing organism. It pulses with energy. Chariots clatter past, narrowly missing pedestrians, while donkeys laden with goods jostle for space. Merchants hawk their wares with booming voices, everything from shimmering silks to fragrant oils, from freshly baked bread to intricately carved amulets. You marvel at the sheer scale of it all. This isn't some sleepy provincial town. This is the crossroads of empires, a beacon of trade and culture, and, crucially for you, the undisputed capital of learning. As you begin to navigate the throng, heading inland, you notice something rather unusual for an ancient city. The streets are remarkably straight, laid out in a logical, almost modern grid pattern. This isn't the organic sprawl of older settlements. This is the deliberate design of a visionary, Alexander the Great, or rather, his chief architect, Dinocrates. It's a quirky tidbit you recall from your pre-departure reading, how this city was planned with such foresight, making it surprisingly easy to get your bearings, even without a smartphone. No getting hopelessly lost in a labyrinth of winding alleyways here, at least not initially. Well, unless you're me, and you manage to get lost in a straight line. Your eyes, however, are constantly drawn upwards, searching. You know it's here, somewhere in this grand mosaic of buildings. The lighthouse of Alexandria, the famous Pharos, a true wonder of the ancient world, dominates the skyline, its white stone gleaming like a colossal finger pointing towards the heavens. Even from a distance, its sheer magnitude is breathtaking. You imagine the immense fire that burns at its summit each night, guiding countless ships safely into this very harbor. It's a mainstream historical fact, of course, that this colossal structure stood for centuries, a testament to ancient engineering prowess, and a vital landmark for any sailor approaching the city. You feel a shiver of awe, a confirmation that you are indeed in a place of monumental achievement. But the lighthouse, magnificent as it is not your ultimate destination. You seek a different kind of light, an intellectual illumination. You ask for directions, a process that involves a lot of pointing, enthusiastic gesturing, and your admittedly rusty Koine Greek. Most people seem to understand what you're looking for, their eyes lighting up with a mixture of pride and reverence when you mention the Mouse-Ion or the Great Library. It's clear this institution is not just a building, it's the very soul of the city. You even get a chuckle from a street vendor who, after giving you directions, asks if you're looking for the best place to buy a camel. No, just books, thank you, you reply with a tired smile. The further you move from the docks, the more the city transforms. The raucous energy of the port gives way to wider avenues, grander buildings, and a more refined atmosphere. You pass by stately villas with cool courtyards, temples dedicated to various gods, and public baths where citizens gather to socialize and philosophize. The air feels cleaner here, less burdened by the smells of commerce, replaced by the scent of blooming flowers and perhaps the faint, sweet aroma of papyrus being processed. And then you see it. Or rather, you begin to see the complex of which it is a part. It's not a single, isolated structure, but a sprawling academic precinct, a collection of grand buildings. The library is intertwined with the Mouse-Ion, the Temple of the Muses, a research institution that housed scholars, lecture halls, observatories, and botanical gardens. Historians still debate the precise architectural layout of the library complex itself, whether the main scrolls were housed solely within the Mouse-Ion or in a separate, grander structure nearby. But from your vantage point, it appears as one glorious, interconnected hub of intellectual activity. Your heart quickens. The buildings before you are imposing, built of gleaming marble, adorned with intricate carvings and statues of philosophers and gods. Columns rise majestically, supporting massive lintels. The sheer scale of it is humbling, yet incredibly inviting. This isn't just a place where books are kept. It's a sanctuary, a living organism dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge. It exudes an aura of quiet power, a profound sense of purpose that echoes through the very stones. You walk slower now, savoring each step, each breath. The dust of the road seems to fall away, replaced by the cool, clean air that emanates from the gardens surrounding the complex. You feel a profound sense of belonging, a quiet certainty that you have arrived exactly where you are meant to be. This is no ordinary edifice. It is the intellectual beacon of the world, a repository of human thought stretching back to the dawn of civilization. And you, a humble scholar, are about to step inside. The anticipation is a delicious ache in your chest, a silent promise of endless discovery. The sun, a benevolent golden orb, begins its slow descent, casting long, dramatic shadows across the bustling streets of Alexandria. You've navigated the labyrinthine alleys, the cacophony of vendors hawking their wares, the scent of spices mingling with the salty tang of the harbor. Your sandals, now well worn from the journey, carry you with an almost reverent slowness towards your destination. Each step feels less like a physical act and more like a quiet pilgrimage, a drawing closer to the very heart of the ancient world's intellect. The low hum of the city, once so overwhelming, begins to recede, replaced by a growing sense of anticipation, a gentle thrumming beneath your ribs. And then you see it. Not just a building, but a monument. It emerges from the urban tapestry like a colossal, serene titan, its pale limestone gleaming softly in the softening light. The Library of Alexandria. It doesn't just sit there. It looms, not in an intimidating way, but with an overwhelming, almost magnetic presence. Its sheer scale swallows the surrounding buildings, making them seem like miniature toys. You find yourself stopping, just for a moment, to let your eyes trace its contours, to appreciate the deliberate, harmonious lines of its architecture. It's a structure built with purpose, with vision, and with an almost audacious belief in the enduring power of human thought. You might even chuckle softly to yourself, a tiny, almost inaudible sound, thinking how this place makes even the grandest temples feel like mere garden sheds by comparison. The main entrance, the very threshold you are about to cross, is not just a doorway, it is a statement. Two towering, burnished bronze gates stand sentinel, each intricately carved with scenes depicting the muses, philosophers, and mythical figures associated with knowledge and inspiration. The metal, aged by centuries of sun and the touch of countless hands, holds a deep, resonant patina. You reach out, your fingers brushing against the cool, smooth surface of the bronze, feeling the faint indentations of the artistry. There's a quiet power emanating from them, a silent welcome to those deemed worthy of entry. Above the gates, a massive lintel, carved from a single block of highly polished granite, bears an inscription in elegant Greek characters. You don't need to read it to understand its essence. It speaks of wisdom, of learning, of the pursuit of truth. It's less a sign and more a sacred invocation. As you approach, you notice the sheer meticulousness of the construction. The blocks of stone fit together with a precision that speaks of master craftsmen and an almost obsessive dedication to perfection. The columns flanking the gates are fluted and capped with ornate capitals, each one a testament to the classical orders, yet imbued with a distinct Alexandrian flair. Sunlight, now slanting even lower, catches the polished surfaces, making them glow with an inner luminescence. You take a deep, slow breath, the air here already feeling different, cleaner, perhaps, or simply imbued with the faint, almost imperceptible scent of old papyrus and quiet contemplation, a stark contrast to the lively smells of the city you just left behind. You push one of the massive bronze gates. It moves with a surprising ease, a testament to the ingenuity of its ancient hinges, opening inward with a soft, almost imperceptible sigh. It's a sound so gentle, so inviting, that it feels less like entering a building and more like stepping into a different realm entirely. The subtle creak, a whisper against the vast silence, is the only fanfare, and as you cross the threshold, the world outside seems to simply melt away. The clamor of the city, the shouts of the street vendors, the distant cries of gulls, all of it fades into a gentle, muted hum, a distant memory against the profound quiet that now envelopes you. It's as if the very air inside these walls is designed to absorb sound, to encourage introspection. And then you behold it. The immediate interior is not a dark, dusty corridor, but a vast, light-filled courtyard open to the sky. Imagine stepping out of a bustling, noisy airport terminal straight into a perfectly manicured, silent botanical garden. That's the kind of transition you experience. Colonnades of gleaming white marble stretch around the perimeter, supporting a second story that seems to float effortlessly above. The sheer expanse of the space is breathtaking, designed not just for passage, but for contemplation. In the center, a large, ornate fountain gently murmurs, its water catching the last rays of the sun, casting dancing reflections on the polished marble floors. The soft splash of the water is the most prominent sound, a soothing rhythm that immediately lulls your senses. Around you, other figures move with a similar quiet reverence. Scholars, their robes varying in color and fabric, glide purposefully across the courtyard, some deep in thought, others engaged in hushed conversations. Scribes, identifiable by their ink-stained fingers and focused gazes, move between various wings of the complex. There's a palpable sense of purpose in the air, a shared dedication to the pursuit of knowledge. It's not a frenetic energy, but a deep, steady current, like a powerful river flowing silently underground. You observe them, these custodians and seekers of wisdom, and a tiny smile touches your lips. It feels less like a workplace and more like an intellectual monastery, where the sacred texts are not prayers, but the accumulated wisdom of millennia. The scale of the library is truly mind-boggling. It was founded in the 3rd century BCE, likely under Ptolemy I Soter, and quickly grew to become the largest and most significant repository of knowledge in the ancient world, housing hundreds of thousands of scrolls. You can feel the weight of that history, the sheer volume of human endeavor contained within these walls. It's not just a collection of books. It's a living, breathing testament to curiosity, to the relentless human drive to understand the cosmos, to record triumphs and failures, to categorize, to analyze, to dream. You might think, with a touch of gentle sarcasm, that navigating this place will require more than just a good memory. You'll probably need a cartographer, an experienced guide, and maybe even a small, well-stocked snack vendor strategically placed around the corners, just for emergencies. You notice details. The subtle scent of cedar wood from the scroll cabinets, the whisper of papyrus as someone nearby turns a page, the distant, muffled sound of a scribe's quill scratching on a fresh sheet. The light, filtered through high windows and open courtyards, is always soft, never harsh, designed to protect the delicate scrolls and soothe the eyes of diligent readers. It creates an atmosphere of perpetual twilight, a timeless space where hours can melt into moments and moments into revelations. Historians still argue whether the library truly held 700,000 scrolls at its peak, or if that figure includes the collection of the daughter library at the Serapeum, but regardless, the sheer scale of the collection was unprecedented. It's a thought that humbles you, making your own contributions feel like a single grain of sand on an endless beach. Yet, it also ignites a spark of excitement. Imagine the untold treasures, the forgotten wisdom, the philosophical treatises, the astronomical observations, the medical texts, the epic poems, all waiting to be discovered, to be understood. There's even a fascinating, slightly quirky tidbit about how they acquired some of their scrolls. It's said that every ship entering Alexandria's harbor had its books confiscated, copied by the library's scribes, and then returned to their owners, with the copies remaining in the library's collection. A rather aggressive acquisition policy, wouldn't you say? It certainly speaks to the library's insatiable appetite for knowledge, a hunger that transcended borders and personal ownership. You can almost picture a bewildered merchant, just trying to dock his ship, suddenly having his personal scrolls spirited away by an eager librarian for a quick duplication. You stand there, in the heart of this intellectual beacon, and a profound sense of awe washes over you. It's a feeling of being simultaneously tiny and immensely significant. Tiny because of the vastness of the knowledge surrounding you, the centuries of thought that preceded your arrival. Significant because you are now a part of it, an inheritor and a future contributor to this grand tapestry of human understanding. The air itself seems to hum with the quiet energy of a million dormant voices, waiting to be reawakened by the touch of a curious mind. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the silence, the soft light, and the gentle murmur of the fountain wash over you. This isn't just a job, it's an immersion, and you know, with a certainty that settles deep in your bones, that you are exactly where you are meant to be. The great gates swing shut behind you, not with a resounding clang, but with a soft, ancient sigh of wood and well-oiled bronze. It's a sound that seems to absorb all the bustling clamor of Alexandria, leaving you in a sudden, profound quietude. The air here is different too, cooler, laden with the dry, sweet scent of aged papyrus and cedarwood, a fragrance that whispers of forgotten centuries and countless stories. You stand for a moment, letting your eyes adjust to the muted light that filters down from high windows, illuminating dust motes dancing like tiny, slow-motion stars in the hallowed space. This is it. No turning back now. Your initial days are less about philosophical revelation and more about the surprisingly mundane, yet deeply grounding, realities of managing the world's greatest collection of knowledge. Think of it as the ultimate library orientation, but without the awkward icebreakers or the laminated ID badge. Instead, you're handed a simple linen tunic, probably already dusted with a fine coating of literary particulate, and introduced to your supervisor, a wizened, soft-spoken elder whose eyes hold the quiet wisdom of countless scrolls. His name, if you recall it correctly through the haze of new sensory input, sounds something like Philo or perhaps Ptolemy, or maybe just the keeper of the scrolls in the ancient equivalent of a whispered office memo. Your first task? Dusting. Yes, you, a budding scholar drawn by the intellectual siren song of Alexandria, begin your journey by becoming intimately acquainted with the microscopic remnants of history. You run your fingers over countless scroll cases, feeling the smooth, polished wood, the occasional rough texture of an unvarnished piece, the fine, almost silky layer of ancient dust that clings to everything. It's not just any dust, mind you. This is the dust of Homer, of Euclid, of Sappho. Each tiny particle a silent witness to millennia of thought. You find yourself wondering if, by inhaling it, you're somehow absorbing a fraction of their genius by osmosis. Probably not, but it's a nice thought, isn't it? Much more poetic than just allergens. You learn the proper way to handle a scroll with reverence, with care, as if each rolled cylinder holds a fragile, living breath. You're taught to unroll them slowly, gently, admiring the neat, uniform script that covers the papyrus like tiny, industrious ants marching across a field. Sometimes the ink is still remarkably vibrant, a deep black or a rich reddish-brown. Other times it's faded to a whisper, barely visible against the creamy background, demanding a keen eye and a steady hand just to make out the characters. Your days quickly settle into a rhythm of quiet, diligent work. You're assigned to one of the vast halls, a labyrinth of shelves stretching towards the high ceilings, each shelf laden with hundreds, perhaps thousands, of scrolls. Your specific corner of the universe, for now, is dedicated to texts on natural philosophy and medicine. You spend hours meticulously sorting, arranging, and reshelving scrolls that have been consulted by other scholars. It's a bit like playing the world's most intellectual game of Tetris, ensuring each scroll fits perfectly into its designated slot, its pinax, the small tag attached to the end of the roll, bearing its title and author, facing outwards for easy identification. This early, hands-on experience is your true introduction to the library's immense breadth. As you handle scroll after scroll, you can't help but glance at the pinax. You see names you recognize from your preliminary studies, and countless others that are utterly new to you. There are treatises on the movement of the stars, detailed anatomical studies, philosophical discourses on the nature of reality, and even practical guides on irrigation or shipbuilding. It's like peeking into the collective mind of humanity, laid bare in neatly rolled packages. You realize, with a slight internal shudder, that you could spend a dozen lifetimes here and still only scratch the surface of what's contained within these walls. It's both exhilarating and profoundly humbling. One of your recurring tasks involves moving recently acquired scrolls from the receiving area to their proper sections. This is where you encounter the library's famously aggressive acquisition policy. It's a mainstream historical fact that the Ptolemaic kings, who founded and funded the library, were insatiable collectors, famously demanding that ships docking in Alexandria surrender any books they carried for copying. The library would then return the copy to the owner, keeping the original for its own collection. So, you find yourself handling scrolls that have traveled across vast oceans, their papyrus perhaps still faintly smelling of salt and distant lands. You often wonder about the original owners, the scholars or merchants who reluctantly handed over their precious text. Did they mind? Or were they secretly thrilled to have their work copied and preserved in such a prestigious institution? Historians still argue whether the legendary number of scrolls, estimated to be in the hundreds of thousands, was truly accurate or an embellished tale. But as you lift box after heavy box, you start to believe every single one of those exaggerated claims. Your biceps are certainly getting an unexpected workout. Sometimes you're tasked with the delicate work of unrolling a scroll for the first time in centuries, to check its integrity or to prepare it for a scribe to copy. This is where the gentle sarcasm of your internal monologue really kicks in. You carefully unroll a scroll, your fingers trained to avoid tearing the brittle papyrus, and a cloud of ancient dust puffs out. You think, ah yes, the original cloud computing, right here in my face. You learn to hold your breath, or at least master a technique of shallow breathing, to avoid inhaling too much of the past. It's a surprisingly intimate act, being the first person in perhaps hundreds of years to lay eyes on these words, to feel the texture of the papyrus that someone else, long dead, meticulously crafted. You also get a glimpse into the library's unique filing system. It's not just putting things in alphabetical order by author, oh no. There are categories within categories, cross-references that make your head spin, and sometimes, you suspect, a logic that only makes sense to the person who devised it centuries ago. It's more complex than assembling an IKEA bookshelf with only pictograms for instructions. You chuckle to yourself, imagining the ancient equivalent of a tech support line for scholars who couldn't find the scroll they needed. Have you tried looking under philosophy, subsection ethics, subsection virtue, then Plato, and then dialogues, and then perhaps Republic? No? Well, try Socrates then. Despite the initial grind, there's a profound satisfaction in this meticulous work. Each perfectly placed scroll, each carefully dusted shelf, contributes to the grand order of things. You begin to understand the sheer scale of the preservation effort. It's not just about collecting knowledge. It's about making it accessible, protecting it from the ravages of time, insects, and carelessness. You learn that some scrolls are wrapped in linen, others kept in special cedar boxes to deter pests. There are even anecdotal whispers about small, venomous snakes being kept in certain areas to deal with rodent problems, a quirky or fringe tidbit that makes you eye the darker corners of the shelves with a newfound respect. You definitely make sure to tap the scroll cases before you reach in. Just in case. As the days turn into weeks, the initial awe of the library slowly transforms into a comfortable familiarity. The towering shelves no longer feel overwhelming but rather like a comforting presence. The quiet hum of activity, the rustle of papyrus, the soft scratch of quills from a distant copying room, the gentle murmur of scholars in hushed debate becomes the soundtrack to your life. You are a small, diligent cog in a magnificent machine, and in this quiet, unassuming work, you feel a deep sense of purpose. You are not yet contributing to the collective knowledge, but you are part of its very foundation, ensuring that the wisdom of the past remains available for those who seek it. And as you methodically organize another stack of scrolls, you realize that even in these humble tasks, you are already deeply, irrevocably, entwined with the ancient heart of human thought. The initial days of meticulous organization, of carefully categorizing and shelving, were like learning to navigate a labyrinth blindfolded. You touched the papyrus, felt the ancient fibers, but the true scope of the library's mind-bending collection remained just beyond your grasp, a whispered promise. Then, slowly, as the dust of your first weeks settled, and the rhythm of the place began to hum in your veins, you start to truly unveil ancient knowledge. It's not just a collection, it's the collected consciousness of the known world, breathing softly around you, waiting for your touch. Imagine standing in the digital age, with all of Wikipedia, Google Scholar, and every major university's archives at your fingertips, and then imagine that feeling condensed into tangible, rollable, slightly brittle scrolls. That's what washes over you. The sheer, overwhelming breadth of it. It's not just big, it's fundamentally, existentially vast. You pull out a scroll, the faint, sweet scent of aged papyrus and cedar oil wafting up, and you realize you're holding centuries of thought, preserved by careful hands. The ink, often a deep, rich black, sometimes a faded brown, speaks of countless hours of diligent work. This isn't just data, it's a conversation across time. You start with what you know, of course. Philosophy. The familiar giants are here, their words echoing through the halls. Plato's dialogues, sharp and questioning, making you feel as if Socrates himself is in the room, raising an eyebrow at your quiet contemplation. Aristotle's treatises, meticulously categorizing the natural world, logic, ethics, so comprehensive, you almost expect him to pop out from behind a stack of scrolls, offering a lecture on the proper classification of, say, a particularly stubborn dust bunny. You find the Stoics, advocating for inner peace amidst external chaos, and the Epicureans, quietly suggesting that pleasure, rightly understood, is the highest good. It's all here, every nuanced argument, every school of thought, laid out for your quiet consumption. It's like a never-ending philosophical debate club, except everyone is long dead, and you're the only one still breathing and taking notes. But then, you venture beyond the familiar. You stumble into sections you hadn't even considered. Engineering marvels. You unroll scrolls detailing the mechanics of water clocks so precise they could rival a modern wristwatch, or automatons that could actually move and speak, maybe not speak like you and I, but make impressive whirring and clanking noises that would surely impress the ancient equivalent of a tech influencer. You find diagrams of sophisticated cranes used to build the very structures of Alexandria you now inhabit. There are blueprints for siege engines that could make a Roman legionary gulp, and detailed descriptions of hydraulic systems that kept the city's fountains flowing. You realize that ancient ingenuity wasn't just about big pyramids, it was about clever, intricate machines that were, frankly, pretty mind-blowing for their time. It makes you wonder how many ancient inventors were just a few gears shy of building a functional time machine. Joke 1. Maybe that's why we don't have them now, they're all stuck in 2024 trying to figure out TikTok. Then there's medicine. Scrolls upon scrolls dedicated to the human body, to ailments, to remedies. You read about Hippocrates, the father of medicine, and his rational approach to illness, separating it from divine punishment. You find detailed anatomical drawings, surprisingly accurate for a time before widespread dissection was common practice. There are recipes for herbal concoctions that sound suspiciously like ancient smoothies, and descriptions of surgical procedures that make you wince just reading them. It's a testament to human resilience and curiosity, even in the face of suffering. You also find more unconventional remedies. For instance, you might stumble upon a scroll suggesting that the best cure for a headache is to wear a garland of parsley, or that applying a poultice of pigeon droppings could cure baldness. Quirky/fringe tidbit. Ancient Egyptian medical texts, some of which were likely present in the library, even detailed remedies involving ingredients like lizard's blood and donkey's teeth, which certainly puts modern homeopathy into perspective. You pause, considering the efficacy of pigeon droppings, and decide to stick to quiet contemplation for your own health. The mathematical section is daunting, yet exhilarating. Euclid's Elements is here, of course, the foundational text for geometry that would influence thinkers for millennia. You see the elegant proofs, the logical progression, and you understand why it was considered a masterpiece. You also discover the works of Archimedes, not just his famous Eureka moment, but his profound contributions to mechanics, hydrostatics, and the calculation of pi. The sheer intellectual rigor is palpable. It's like looking at the source code of the universe, written in elegant lines and precise angles. And then there's astronomy. The library was a hub for understanding the cosmos. You find star charts, meticulously drawn, showing constellations recognizable even today. There are treatises by Aristarchus of Samos, who, amazingly, proposed a heliocentric model of the universe, that the Earth revolved around the Sun centuries before Copernicus. Mainstream historical fact: while this idea was not widely accepted in his time, his work was preserved here, a testament to the library's commitment to collecting all knowledge, even the controversial. You can almost feel the shift in perspective, the humbling realization of humanity's tiny place in a vast, star-strewn cosmos. The literary scrolls are a pure joy. Homer, of course, both the Iliad and the Odyssey, epic tales that still resonate with adventure and human drama. But then there are the plays of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, their tragedies exploring fate and morality, and Aristophanes, whose comedies would make even the most serious scholar crack a smile. You find Sappho's lyrical poetry, fragments of beautiful verse that hint at a passionate, vibrant inner life. Reading these, you realize that while the world has changed drastically, the human heart, its joys and sorrows, its loves and losses, has remained remarkably constant. It's like listening to the greatest storytellers of all time, whispering their tales directly into your ear. Geography, history, rhetoric, the categories seem endless. You find Strabo's detailed descriptions of the known world, almost like ancient travel guides, complete with charmingly inaccurate maps. You read Herodotus, the father of history, sometimes charmingly embellishing his accounts with fantastical tales, but always striving to record the past. You even discover obscure scrolls on agriculture, on different types of grains and optimal planting times, or treatises on the breeding of horses. It's truly a universal repository. The process of unveiling isn't just about reading, it's about connecting. You see how philosophy influenced medicine, how mathematics underpinned astronomy, how history informed political thought. It's a vast, interconnected web, and you, a quiet scholar, are slowly, methodically tracing its thread. Your initial tasks of organization now make perfect sense. You weren't just putting scrolls away, you were learning the architecture of human knowledge itself. Sometimes, you'll find a comment scribbled in the margin by a previous scholar, perhaps disagreeing with the author, or adding their own small insight. These are like little secret notes passed across centuries, a quiet nod from a fellow seeker of knowledge. It reminds you that you are part of a lineage, a long line of minds who have sat in these very halls, poring over these very same words. The sheer volume is daunting, almost paralyzing at times. You could spend 1,000 lifetimes here and still not read everything. Joke 2. It's like trying to finish all the shows on your streaming service, except the streaming service is the entire history of human thought, and new episodes are constantly being written. This realization isn't discouraging, though. Instead, it breeds a kind of peaceful acceptance. You are not here to conquer knowledge, but to engage with it, to contribute your own small part to its preservation and understanding. You begin to understand why the library was so legendary. It wasn't just a building. It was a living, breathing testament to humanity's insatiable curiosity. It was, quite literally, the world's first true information superhighway, a place where ideas could travel, be debated, and be preserved for future generations. Historians still argue whether the library truly contained 500,000 or even 700,000 scrolls at its peak, but regardless of the precise number, its impact was immeasurable. Open scholarly debate phrase. Historians still argue whether the library truly contained 500,000 or even 700,000 scrolls at its peak, but regardless of the precise number, its impact was immeasurable. As days bleed into weeks, and weeks into months, this unveiling becomes less about awe and more about deep immersion. The initial shock gives way to a profound sense of purpose. You are no longer just a new scholar, you are becoming an integral part of this vast, silent, intellectual endeavor. The dust motes dancing in the shafts of sunlight feel less like specks of dirt and more like tiny, shimmering particles of ancient wisdom, swirling around you, inviting you deeper into the boundless ocean of knowledge. And you, quietly, gratefully, accept the invitation. As the initial thrill of the library's monumental scale slowly settles into a comforting routine, you begin to truly see the people around you. Before, they were just blurs of activity, fellow pilgrims on the path to knowledge. Now, their individual quirks, the way they hold their quills, the specific scent of their favorite papyrus, start to come into focus. You're not just a solitary seeker in a sea of scrolls anymore, you're becoming part of a living, breathing organism. You find yourself gravitating towards the common areas, not just the quiet alcoves. There's a large, sun-drenched courtyard within the Mouse-Ion complex, often filled with scholars taking a break from their deep dive. It's here, amidst the gentle murmur of conversation and the distant clatter from the kitchens, that you begin your first tentative forays into social interaction. It starts subtly, a shared nod over a particularly dense passage, a quiet sigh of mutual frustration when a scroll is found to be incomplete. Then, perhaps, a shared meal of lentils and bread, simple fare but surprisingly satisfying after hours of mental exertion. You learn to recognize faces, then names, then the obscure fields of study that consume their waking hours. There's Callimachus, the poet and scholar, who seems to know every verse ever written, and who can recite entire epics from memory, often with dramatic flair that makes you wonder if he secretly wishes he were an actor. Then there's Eratosthenes, a man whose mind seems to encompass the entire known world, casually discussing the circumference of the earth while munching on an olive. You're pretty sure he's already figured out how to measure the distance to the moon, too, just for kicks. It's like being in a room full of ancient supergeniuses, and you're just happy you remembered to bring your own stylus. These aren't just polite interactions, though. Oh no. This is Alexandria, the intellectual heart of the world, and within these walls, minds are meant to clash, not just to coexist. The air practically hums with unspoken questions, with theories waiting to be tested, with interpretations just begging to be challenged. It's in the late afternoons, when the light starts to soften and the day's most intense research is done, that the debates truly ignite. Imagine, if you will, a group of scholars gathered around a low table, perhaps with a shared jug of watered wine, their brows furrowed, their hands gesturing wildly. One might be passionately arguing for a specific reading of Homer, convinced that a single word, often overlooked, changes the entire meaning of a pivotal scene. Another, a grammarian with an almost frightening precision, might counter with an exhaustive list of every known instance of that word in ancient Greek literature, proving its usage is consistently different from the proposed interpretation. It's intellectual sparring, a mental wrestling match where the only prize is the satisfaction of a well-articulated argument or the quiet, grudging respect of your peers. You quickly learn that having a brilliant mind isn't enough. You also need to be able to defend your ideas with the tenacity of a hungry lion protecting its dinner. These aren't always grand philosophical debates, mind you. Sometimes they're delightfully niche, bordering on the absurd. You once overheard a truly spirited argument about the precise number of seeds in a pomegranate. One scholar insisted on a theoretical average based on botanical principles, while another, clearly a man of empirical dedication, had apparently spent an entire afternoon meticulously counting seeds from a dozen different pomegranates. He even had a small, ink-stained tally sheet to prove his point. You had to suppress a giggle, realizing that scholarly obsession knows no bounds, whether it's the cosmos or a piece of fruit. It's all knowledge, after all, just in varying levels of deliciousness. These spirited exchanges are not just about proving a point, they're about refining ideas. You learn to listen, not just to speak. You absorb the different approaches to textual criticism, the various schools of thought on mathematics, the intricate nuances of philosophical discourse. It's a master class in critical thinking, delivered by the sharpest minds of the ancient world. You find yourself drawn into these discussions, at first tentatively offering a quiet question, then, as your confidence grows, perhaps a hesitant counter-argument. You learn that a well-placed "have you considered?" can be more impactful than a shouted declaration. One afternoon, you find yourself caught in a particularly heated discussion about the true nature of the universe. A Stoic scholar, calm and unruffled, argues for a deterministic cosmos, where everything is preordained by divine reason. Opposing him is an Epicurean, lively and gesticulating, insisting on a universe of randomly swerving atoms, where free will reigns supreme. Both cite ancient texts, both employ impeccable logic, and both seem utterly convinced of their own rectitude. You stand there, a silent observer, feeling the intellectual vibrations in the air. This, you realize, is what it means to be alive in the Library of Alexandria. It's not just about reading old books, it's about engaging with the ideas within them, making them live again through debate. Historians still argue whether these debates were primarily collaborative efforts to advance knowledge or more competitive displays of individual erudition. You witness both. There are moments of genuine collaboration, where two scholars, each possessing a piece of a puzzle, work together to reconstruct a fragmented text or solve a complex astronomical problem. But then there are also the moments of pure, unadulterated intellectual one-upmanship, where a scholar might unleash a devastatingly obscure historical fact to completely dismantle an opponent's argument. It's exhilarating, if a little terrifying. A mainstream historical fact about the library is that it was not just a repository of scrolls, but also a center of active research and teaching, part of the larger Mouseion, which functioned much like a modern university. Scholars here were not merely copying texts. They were creating new knowledge, conducting experiments, and engaging in profound intellectual discourse. This environment fostered a unique blend of individual specialization and communal learning. You see this firsthand as you watch a geographer meticulously mapping out coastlines, while nearby, a physician discusses the latest advancements in anatomical understanding, often consulting with an engineer about the mechanics of the human body. And then there's the quirky tidbit you pick up. Apparently, some of the more dedicated or perhaps just eccentric scholars had developed a highly specific, almost ritualistic way of unrolling and re-rolling particularly fragile scrolls, involving a series of precise wrist movements and a muttered incantation that sounded suspiciously like a shopping list. You try to mimic it once, just to see, and nearly tear a precious fragment of an ancient play. You stick to the more conventional methods after that, realizing that some scholarly secrets are best left to the masters. The camaraderie grows not just from shared intellectual pursuits, but from the shared experience of living within the library's orbit. You learn to appreciate the quiet nods of encouragement from older scholars when you finally grasp a complex concept, the shared groans when a particularly stubborn inkwell refuses to cooperate, and the collective sigh of relief when the day's last sunlight streams through the high windows, signaling a brief respite from the scrolls. You discover that these scholars, for all their intellectual prowess, are also just people with their own quiet jokes, their preferred spots by the window, and their surprisingly strong opinions on the quality of the communal bread. It's a community built not on blood, but on papyrus and the relentless pursuit of understanding. As your days within the library's hallowed halls lengthen into weeks, and weeks into months, the initial thrill of discovery begins to intertwine with the steady rhythm of scholarly life. You've spent time debating the finer points of Aristotelian logic, poring over astronomical charts, and tracing the intricate pathways of ancient engineering. But now a new, more tactile chapter unfolds before you, one that demands not just your intellect, but the steady hand and patient spirit of a true artisan. You are called to the scriptorium, the quiet heart of the library's preservation efforts, where the very act of knowledge is not just consumed, but meticulously, painstakingly recreated. Stepping into this dedicated space, the air changes. It's no longer just the scent of aged papyrus and dust, but a subtle, earthy aroma of fresh ink, beeswax, and perhaps a faint, sweet hint of cedar from the wooden tablets. The ambient soundscape shifts too. The low murmur of conversation from the main halls gives way to a symphony of soft scratches, the gentle rustle of unrolled scrolls, and the occasional, almost imperceptible sigh of concentration. Sunlight, diffused through high windows, falls in long, pale shafts, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air and highlighting the focused intensity on the faces of your fellow scribes. It's a bit like walking into a very, very quiet office, only instead of the clatter of keyboards, you get the delicate shhk of a quill on papyrus. And let me tell you, the ancient world's version of a printing press was, well, it was you. And your hands. And the hands of countless others. Your first lessons are fundamental, almost meditative. You learn the proper way to prepare your workspace, spreading a clean linen cloth over your low, sloping desk. Then comes the papyrus itself. You discover that not all papyrus is created equal. Some sheets are smooth and creamy, perfect for fine script, while others are coarser, more absorbent, suitable for everyday notes or less formal copies. You learn to handle it with reverence, unrolling the scroll just enough to reveal the section you're working on, anchoring it gently with small, weighted blocks of polished stone. The papyrus, you quickly realize, is a marvel of ancient ingenuity. It's made from the pith of the papyrus plant, sliced into thin strips, laid crisscross, pressed, and then dried. This process creates a remarkably durable and flexible surface, far superior to anything else available at the time for extensive writing. This, you think, holding a pristine sheet, is where history itself is woven. Next, the ink. You're introduced to the various pigments and binders that create the library's palette. For the foundational black text, the most common ink is made from soot, often lampblack, collected from oil lamps, mixed with a gum Arabic binder and water. It's a deep, rich black that flows smoothly from the quill. For headings, titles, or important annotations, you learn to grind ochre or cinnabar to create a vibrant red ink, a practice that gives us the word rubric today, from the Latin rubrica, meaning red earth. You spend hours meticulously grinding pigments with a pestle and mortar, mixing them with just the right amount of water until the consistency is perfect. Not too thin, not too thick, a bit like trying to get your morning coffee just right, only with far higher stakes for posterity. It's surprisingly satisfying, this alchemy of transforming raw earth and soot into the very words that will carry thoughts across millennia. Then, the quill. Oh, the quill. You are handed a reed pen, or calamus, the standard writing tool for centuries before the goose quill became prevalent in Europe. You learn to sharpen its tip with a small, sharp knife, making a precise, angled cut to create the perfect nib. Too blunt, and the ink blobs. Too sharp, and it scratches and tears the papyrus. It's a delicate dance of pressure and angle, a skill that demands patience and a steady hand. You practice endlessly on scrap pieces, making strokes, loops, and the basic forms of Greek letters until your hand aches, but your muscle memory begins to form. You quickly learn that a good scribe is not just someone who knows the alphabet, but someone who understands the subtle physics of ink flow and fiber resistance. It's like learning to play a musical instrument, but instead of notes, you're hitting perfect letter forms. Finally, you sit down for your first actual copying task. You're given a master scroll, an original, perhaps even a treasured first edition of a philosophical treatise or a mathematical theorem. Your job: to create an exact, legible duplicate. You unroll the master scroll to your left, your blank papyrus to your right. You dip your sharpened reed pen into the small inkwell, watching the black liquid cling to the fibers of the nib. The first stroke. It's hesitant, a bit shaky. But you persevere. You learn to maintain a consistent pressure, a steady pace. You learn to breathe with your strokes, to find a rhythm in the repetitive motion. The scriptorium becomes your sanctuary within a sanctuary. Hours melt away as you transcribe, word by painstaking word. You become intimately familiar with the quirks of the original scribe's hand, their subtle flourishes, their occasional abbreviations. You catch errors, too, and learn the protocol for marking them in the margin for correction by a senior scholar. It's a surprisingly engaging process, a form of active reading where every single letter demands your full attention. You can't skim. You can't skip. You must engage with every syllable. It's like being forced to hand copy an entire Wikipedia article, but somehow, the ancient setting makes it feel less like a chore and more like a sacred duty. The sheer volume of work is staggering. Historians still argue whether the Library of Alexandria housed hundreds of thousands or even close to 1,000,000 scrolls at its zenith, but regardless of the exact number, the only way to build and maintain such a collection was through relentless, dedicated copying. Every new acquisition, every scholarly work produced, every damaged scroll in need of replacement are all required the same meticulous handwork. You are a cog in this colossal intellectual machine, and you feel the weight and the honor of that responsibility. Sometimes your quill splits mid-stroke, sending a tiny, catastrophic splatter of ink across your perfectly formed letters. A small, exasperated sigh escapes your lips, a universally understood sound of ancient world frustration. You learn the delicate art of scraping off wet ink with a small, sharp knife, or gently blotting it with a fine sponge, hoping to salvage the sheet. Other times your hand cramps, your back aches from hours hunched over the low desk, and your eyes blur from staring at the tiny script. But then you step back, unroll the newly copied section, and behold the pristine, flowing lines of your own work, a perfect mirror of the original. That's when the deep satisfaction washes over you. You are not just copying words. You are replicating thought, preserving wisdom, ensuring that the insights of a philosopher from centuries past will continue to enlighten minds centuries hence. You learn the subtle art of ensuring consistent line spacing and margin width, often using a ruler and a stylus to lightly impress guidelines onto the papyrus before inking. This practice, called pricking and ruling, ensured uniformity across multiple columns of text on a single scroll. It's a testament to the ancient scribes' dedication to aesthetic precision, a quality that makes these ancient manuscripts true works of art as much as vessels of knowledge. One afternoon, while working on a lengthy medical treatise by Hippocrates, you encounter a peculiar marginal note. It's a tiny drawing, almost imperceptible, of a small, stylized mouse. You ask an elder scribe about it, and he chuckles, explaining that it was a common, if unofficial, practice among some scribes to draw small animals or symbols in the margins to signify a particularly tedious or difficult section of text, or sometimes just as a personal mark. It's a quirky, almost rebellious whisper from a long-dead hand, a tiny human touch in a world of scholarly rigor. You find yourself smiling, a shared moment of ancient solidarity across the centuries. As you continue to refine your craft, you begin to appreciate the quiet power of your work. You are a bridge builder, connecting the minds of the past with the scholars of the future. Each copied scroll is a vessel carrying ideas, stories, and discoveries forward through time. You are safeguarding not just individual texts, but the collective memory of civilization. And in this quiet, repetitive, yet profoundly meaningful labor, you find a deep sense of purpose, a grounding contentment that transcends the fleeting excitements of the outside world. The library, in its quiet insistence on preservation, truly becomes the beating heart of Alexandria's intellectual life, and you, with your quill and ink, are one of its vital arteries. As days turn into months, the initial thrill of simply being here, nestled within the library's echoing halls, begins to settle into a more profound, more persistent hum of purpose. You've moved beyond the initial awe, beyond the sheer novelty of touching scrolls that once passed through the hands of thinkers long turned to dust. Now you're faced with a delightful, yet slightly daunting, challenge, choosing your scholarly path. It's a bit like standing in front of the world's most extensive buffet, except instead of prime rib and creme brulee, you're staring down millennia of human thought, from the most abstract philosophy to the most practical engineering marvels. Where do you even begin to fill your intellectual plate? You find yourself wandering, almost aimlessly at first, through the seemingly endless avenues of knowledge. One morning, you might find yourself drawn to the section on mathematics, the scrolls neatly arranged, each one a testament to the elegant precision of numbers. You unfurl a scroll detailing Euclid's elements, tracing the geometric proofs with your finger, feeling the cool, dry papyrus. The certainty, the undeniable logic of it all is strangely comforting. No ambiguity, no room for debate, just pure, unadulterated truth unfolding before your eyes. You spend hours there, engrossed, feeling a faint, unfamiliar stir of fascination. Perhaps this is it, you muse, the universal language. You even try to sketch a few triangles in the margins of your personal note tablet, feeling a brief surge of intellectual prowess, before you remember you're more of a words person than a numbers person, and your triangles look suspiciously like misshapen lumps. Light joke 1. The next day, a different scent pulls you in, the subtle, earthy aroma of dried herbs and something faintly medicinal from the scrolls on anatomy and healing. You unroll a text attributed to Hippocrates, detailing observations of fevers, wounds, and the curious theories of humors of blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, that govern the body. It's fascinating, in a slightly unsettling way, to read about ancient surgical instruments and remedies that range from surprisingly insightful to, well, let's just say, questionable. You read about the careful observation of symptoms, the detailed case studies, and you feel a profound respect for these early physicians, even if their understanding of germ theory was, shall we say, a tad underdeveloped. You might even find yourself instinctively patting your own stomach, just to make sure all your humors are behaving themselves. Light joke 2. But then the philosophical treatises call to you, their arguments woven with a complexity that makes the mathematical proofs seem almost childishly simple. You delve into Plato's Republic, wrestling with the concepts of ideal forms and the perfect society. Then Aristotle's Ethics, pondering virtue and the good life. The sheer breadth of thought, the relentless pursuit of understanding the human condition and the nature of reality, is intoxicating. You find yourself pacing the quiet aisles, muttering to yourself, arguing silently with long-dead philosophers as if they were right there, ready to retort. The custodians probably think you're a bit eccentric, but then again, who isn't in a library full of silent conversations? You sample a little bit of everything. The epic sweep of history, chronicled by Herodotus and Thucydides, where battles rage and empires rise and fall, all captured on brittle sheets of papyrus. You read about the Egyptian pharaohs, their dynasties stretching back into the mists of time, and then the burgeoning power of Rome, still a relatively new kid on the block, flexing its muscles. You even dip into the truly esoteric, stumbling upon a collection of dream interpretation manuals, where the flight of a bird or the sight of a particular animal in slumber could portend anything from good fortune to impending doom. It's a quirky tidbit of ancient life that reminds you how much humans have always sought meaning in the inexplicable. The library, you quickly learn, wasn't just a dusty repository. It was a living, breathing organism of knowledge, its collection meticulously organized, even if by today's standards the cataloging system might seem a little unwieldy. Mainstream historical fact. The Library of Alexandria was famed for its comprehensive collection across virtually all known fields of knowledge at the time, not just literature or history. It was a true intellectual powerhouse, aiming to house every single scroll ever written. This ambition meant that scholars like you had an unprecedented opportunity to compare, contrast, and synthesize information from vastly different disciplines. They even had a system where new acquisitions were copied, with the original stored and the copy circulated, ensuring preservation and access. As the weeks lengthen into months, a subtle shift occurs. The initial intellectual wanderlust begins to coalesce. You notice which sections you return to most often, which scrolls you find yourself holding a little longer, which ideas spark a genuine, unquenchable curiosity rather than mere passing interest. It's not a dramatic epiphany, no sudden flash of lightning illuminating your destined path. Instead, it's a slow, gentle gravitational pull, like the quiet, insistent tug of the moon on the tide. For you, that pull began to assert itself most strongly in the realm of ancient history and ethnography. It wasn't just the grand narratives of kings and wars that captivated you, though those were certainly compelling. No, it was the details, the way people lived, their customs, their beliefs, their daily routines. How they built their houses, what they ate, how they worshipped their gods, what jokes they told, what songs they sang. You found yourself drawn to the accounts of travelers, the descriptions of distant lands and exotic peoples, the painstaking efforts of early historians to document not just events, but the very fabric of human existence. You realize it's the why that fascinates you most. Why did societies rise and fall? Why did certain beliefs take root and others wither? What drove human innovation, human conflict, human cooperation? You're less interested in the abstract purity of mathematics or the specific ailments of the body, and more in the sprawling, messy, endlessly fascinating narrative of humanity itself. You want to understand the threads that connect the past to the present, the echoes of ancient decisions in the world around you. You start to spend more and more time in the historical archives, the scrolls on ethnography, the collections of ancient laws and customs. You learn about the various schools of historical thought that existed even then, some focused purely on chronology, others on causation, still others on the moral lessons embedded in the past. It's a rich, fertile ground for inquiry, full of ambiguities and interpretations. And here's where you encounter one of those delightful academic conundrums. Historians still argue whether the ancients truly understood the concept of objective history as we define it today, or if their narratives were always inherently shaped by moral lessons, national pride, or personal biases. You find yourself poring over different accounts of the same event, a battle, a political upheaval, noting the subtle discrepancies, the shifts in emphasis, the inclusion or exclusion of certain details. It's like piecing together a vast, ancient jigsaw puzzle where half the pieces are missing, and the ones you have might be from different boxes entirely. But that's precisely what makes it so thrilling. The detective work, the careful sifting through layers of interpretation to get closer to something resembling the truth. The quiet, persistent joy of it settles deep within you. It's not about grand pronouncements or sudden breakthroughs, not yet. It's about the slow, deliberate accumulation of knowledge, one scroll at a time. It's about the profound satisfaction of connecting a small, seemingly insignificant detail from one text to a broader theme in another, watching the vast tapestry of the past slowly, painstakingly, begin to reveal its patterns. You've found your intellectual home, nestled deep within the scrolls of human memory, and the journey has only just begun. Now, with your scholarly compass firmly set towards the sprawling, messy, endlessly fascinating narrative of humanity itself, the grand tapestry of ancient history and ethnography, you truly begin to sink into the embrace of research. The initial exploratory wanderings through the library's vast collections have given way to a focused, almost meditative pursuit. Hours don't just turn into days. They dissolve like sugar in a warm cup of herbal tea, leaving behind only the rich, lingering flavor of discovery. The rhythm of your days becomes a quiet, predictable dance. You arrive as the first rays of dawn filter through the high windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the cool, silent air. The library, still largely empty save for a few other early risers, feels like a private sanctuary, a vast, echoing chamber where the whispers of the past are most easily heard. You make your way directly to the historical archives, a section that now feels like a second home. The scent of aged papyrus, dry and faintly sweet, is a comfort, like the smell of an old friend's study. You select your scrolls for the day, often several, carefully unrolling them on the broad wooden tables. Your stylus is poised, your own blank papyrus sheets ready for notes, for cross-references, for the sudden flash of insight that might connect a seemingly disparate fact from one text to a grander narrative in another. This isn't passive reading. It's an active engagement, a conversation across millennia. You're not just absorbing information, you're dissecting it, questioning it, holding it up to the light of other accounts. Sometimes you'll be deep into an account of the Persian Wars, meticulously comparing Herodotus's narrative with later Roman interpretations, noting where details diverge, where biases might creep in. You might find yourself chuckling at a particularly dramatic flourish, or raising an eyebrow at a suspiciously convenient omission. Other times you're lost in a travelogue, perhaps by a Greek merchant who ventured down the Nile, describing the peculiar customs of a Nubian tribe, their unique hairstyles, their intricate rituals, their surprising generosity. You read about their methods of farming, their communal living arrangements, and you realize just how diverse and inventive human societies have always been. It's like scrolling through endless, ancient YouTube documentaries, except the content is far richer and the buffering is non-existent. Light joke 1. The sheer volume of material is immense, of course. You're constantly cross-referencing, pulling out another scroll from the shelf, then another, chasing a footnote, verifying a name, clarifying a date. It's a bit like being a detective, except your clues are written on fragile sheets of papyrus, and your suspects have been dead for centuries. You might be trying to piece together the true motivation behind a particular political alliance, or understand the social impact of a new agricultural technique. You learn to recognize the handwriting of different scribes, the subtle variations in their ink, the telltale signs of a later correction or annotation. It's a meticulous, painstaking process, but every connection made, every hidden insight uncovered, feels like striking intellectual gold. One day, you might stumble upon a series of legal documents detailing a property dispute from ancient Babylon, and suddenly, the dry laws you read about in another scroll spring to life, revealing the complexities of daily life, the arguments over water rights or inherited land. You see the human drama beneath the legalistic language. Or perhaps you uncover a detailed account of an ancient festival, a vibrant description of the dances, the costumes, the offerings, and for a moment, you can almost hear the music, almost smell the incense, almost feel the communal joy or reverence. It's in these moments that the past isn't just a collection of facts. It's a living, breathing entity, full of people just like you, with their own hopes, fears, and quirks. Mainstream historical fact. The Library of Alexandria was a hub for critical scholarship, and its scholars were pioneers in textual criticism and historical analysis. They didn't just passively collect, they actively engaged in philology, the study of language in historical sources, verifying texts, identifying forgeries, and comparing different versions of the same work. This critical approach was crucial for establishing accurate historical records and reliable philosophical texts. You find yourself adopting these very techniques, learning to question every source, to look for corroborating evidence, and to consider the context in which a text was created. Sometimes you find a truly odd, almost unbelievable account, perhaps a tale of a distant tribe who claimed to communicate with animals, or a detailed description of an ancient ritual involving strange potions and incantations meant to ward off evil spirits. These are the quirky bits, the fringe tidbits that remind you just how different, yet fundamentally similar, the human experience has always been. You might read about a Roman general who refused to fight on a certain day because his chickens wouldn't eat, or a Greek philosopher who believed the world was an enormous, sentient being. These peculiar beliefs, while perhaps not central to the grand sweep of history, offer a window into the ancient mind, revealing the superstitions and unconventional wisdom that coexisted with groundbreaking scientific and philosophical thought. It adds a certain spice to your otherwise rigorous research, a reminder that even the most serious historical figures had their eccentricities. The joy of this deepened research isn't always about uncovering something entirely new to the library's collection, though that comes later. Often, it's about discovering something new to you, a connection or an understanding that illuminates previously obscure passages. You might spend an entire afternoon cross-referencing different accounts of a single battle, noting how one general's memoirs downplay his own mistakes while another's official report exaggerates the enemy's numbers. You see the subtle propaganda at play, the human desire to shape the narrative. And this leads you to ponder a recurring question in your chosen field. Historians still debate the true extent to which ancient historical narratives were shaped by political agendas or personal glory, rather than a pure pursuit of factual accuracy. You find yourself weighing the evidence, considering the author's background, their patrons, their potential biases. It's a constant exercise in critical thinking, a delightful intellectual sparring match with the ghosts of ancient chroniclers. The quiet hum of the library is your constant companion. The occasional rustle of a scroll, the soft scratch of another scholar's stylus in a distant corner, the gentle creak of a wooden shelf as someone retrieves a volume. You become acutely aware of the passage of light through the high windows, marking the hours from pale morning to golden afternoon, then to the soft glow of oil lamps as dusk descends. Your back might ache a little from leaning over the heavy scrolls, your fingers might be smudged with ink or dust, but these minor discomforts are utterly eclipsed by the profound contentment that settles over you. You are not merely reading, you are participating. You are engaging in a conversation that spans centuries, adding your own quiet voice to the chorus of human inquiry. This deep dive into the past is not an escape from the present, but rather a way to understand it better, to see the long shadows cast by ancient decisions, the enduring patterns of human behavior. Each day, you feel your understanding expanding, your intellectual muscles growing stronger, and the joy of this pursuit is a quiet, profound reward that makes every single minute worthwhile. The initial thrill of grand discovery, that wide-eyed wonder at the sheer volume of knowledge, slowly, imperceptibly, begins to shift. It's a subtle change, like the turning of a page you hadn't realized was the last on a scroll, only to find another, more intricate one waiting beneath. You've moved past the general awe and into the embrace of something far deeper, the quiet, consuming joy of specialization. The library, once a magnificent, overwhelming ocean, now feels like a series of interconnected, crystal-clear pools, and you're diving into one specific, luminous depth. Remember those early days, meticulously organizing and simply seeing the breadth? Now that breadth has narrowed, not in scope, but in focus. You've chosen your path, perhaps drawn to the celestial dance of the stars, or the intricate geometry of the cosmos. Let's imagine it's the latter, the ancient universe, rendered in numbers and diagrams, beckoning you into its cosmic embrace. Your days are no longer about broad strokes, but about the exquisite, almost meditative process of deepening. You find yourself drawn, almost magnetically, to a particular alcove, a specific section of shelves where the papyrus scrolls on astronomy and mathematics reside. The air here seems to hum with a different kind of energy, a silent testament to centuries of minds grappling with the very fabric of existence. You pull a scroll, perhaps one by Eudoxus, or even earlier, by Pythagoras, and unroll it with a reverence that borders on ritual. The light filtering in from the high windows catches the dust motes dancing in the air, illuminating the faded ink on the brittle papyrus, and for a moment, you feel like the sole heir to a forgotten kingdom. Hours, gentle listener, truly begin to melt away. They don't just pass. They dissolve like sugar in warm water, leaving behind only the sweet, concentrated essence of pure engagement. You might start your day with the sun barely kissing the Alexandrian harbor, and suddenly, the shadows are long, stretching across the polished marble floor, and you realize you haven't even noticed the lunch bell. It's a state of being that modern folks might call flow, but here, in this ancient sanctuary, it's simply the natural rhythm of a mind fully immersed. You're not just reading, you're communing. You trace the Greek letters with a careful finger, sometimes mouthing the words, not for sound, but for the feel of them on your tongue, to truly inhabit the thought process of the long-dead scholar who first penned these lines. You compare different copies of the same text, noting the subtle variations, the occasional scribe's error, perhaps a misplaced nu, or an omega that looks suspiciously like an omicron. It's like being a detective, piecing together clues from across millennia, trying to reconstruct the original intent. Sometimes you even find a small, almost imperceptible correction in the margin, a tiny note left by a previous scholar, perhaps a contemporary of the original author, offering a silent, collaborative whisper across the ages. It's the closest thing to having ancient Reddit comments, only far more polite and infinitely more profound. The joy in this deepening research comes from the aha moments, those tiny explosions of understanding that ripple through your mind. You might be struggling with a complex geometric proof, staring at a diagram that seems to defy logic, and then, suddenly, a line connects, a theorem clicks into place, and the entire structure reveals itself in elegant simplicity. It's a feeling of pure intellectual ecstasy, a silent cheer that resonates only within the confines of your own skull. It's better than finding a forgotten snack in your pocket, I promise you. You begin to notice patterns, connections between seemingly disparate texts. A concept hinted at in a philosophical treatise might be mathematically proven in an astronomical text. You realize that the boundaries between subjects, so rigid in later eras, were far more fluid here. Philosophy informed science, and science informed philosophy, creating a rich tapestry of thought. It's like discovering that your favorite band's lead singer also secretly moonlights as a brilliant theoretical physicist. The synergy is just delightful. One of the most profound insights you uncover isn't necessarily a new mathematical proof, but a deeper understanding of the methodology of these ancient giants. You see how they built upon each other's work, how they rigorously tested their hypotheses, often with surprisingly sophisticated empirical observations. For instance, you might spend days analyzing the detailed star charts and planetary observations, realizing the incredible precision they achieved with relatively simple instruments. This commitment to systematic observation and rigorous deduction, a hallmark of the library's scholarly tradition, laid much of the groundwork for what we now recognize as the scientific method. It's truly mind-boggling when you consider the limitations they faced without telescopes or advanced computing. Imagine trying to calculate planetary orbits with just your eyes and a very fancy abacus. Truly, it makes your modern-day spreadsheet woes seem rather trivial. Sometimes, the hidden insights aren't about grand theories, but about the human element. You might discover a marginal note in a text on optics, a tiny, almost illegible scribble by a long-dead scholar, perhaps complaining about the difficulty of grinding lenses, or perhaps a frustrated exclamation next to a particularly tricky calculation. These small human touches connect you to the past in a remarkably intimate way. It's like finding a sticky note on an old textbook that says, "Don't forget to eat," reminding you that even the greatest minds had their mundane moment. You also start to notice the quirks, the fringe tidbits that make these ancient minds so fascinatingly human. You might stumble upon a passage in an astronomical text that suddenly veers into a discussion of astrological omens, or a seemingly serious mathematical treatise that includes a rather whimsical digression about the optimal number of grains of sand on a beach, for purely hypothetical calculation purposes, of course. One particularly delightful discovery might be a series of marginalia in a papyrus detailing planetary movements, where a previous scholar has meticulously drawn tiny, almost cartoonish faces next to each celestial body, giving them distinct expressions: a grumpy Mars, a serene Venus, a perpetually surprised Jupiter. It's a testament to the fact that even in the most rigorous intellectual pursuits, a little bit of playful humanity could shine through. As you delve deeper, you begin to formulate your own questions, not just seeking answers within the texts, but asking new questions of the text. You're no longer merely a recipient of ancient knowledge but an active participant in its ongoing interpretation. You start to see where the arguments of one scholar might contradict another, where a theory might have been incomplete, or where a previously accepted truth might now seem questionable given your broader understanding. It's a bit like playing a massive, multi-generational game of intellectual telephone, trying to figure out where the message got distorted or where it was brilliantly refined. This process of deepening research isn't always smooth sailing. There are days of frustration, where a particular passage refuses to yield its secrets, or where the ink is too faded, the papyrus too fragile, to decipher. You might spend hours cross-referencing, only to find a dead end. But even these moments of struggle are part of the joyous embrace, because the eventual breakthrough feels all the more satisfying. It's like trying to untangle a particularly stubborn knot of string. When it finally loosens, the relief is immense. You might even find yourself muttering under your breath, "Oh, that's what you meant, you brilliant ancient person." You also become acutely aware of the scholarly debates that rippled through the ancient world, debates that, in some cases, continue to echo down to your own time. For instance, as you pore over the different geocentric models of the universe, you can almost hear the arguments between those who favored simpler, more elegant circular orbits and those who insisted on more complex epicycles to explain retrograde motion. Historians still argue whether the intricate mathematical models developed within the Library of Alexandria were primarily theoretical exercises for elite scholars, or if they had significant practical applications that directly influenced fields like navigation and cartography for the wider populace. It's a fascinating question, isn't it? Were these brilliant minds just building beautiful intellectual castles in the sky, or were they laying the foundations for practical tools that shaped the ancient world? The insights aren't just about what you find in the texts, but what you understand about the texts themselves. You develop a sense for the hand of a particular scribe, the common errors in a certain period, the preferred terminology of a specific school of thought. You become a connoisseur of ancient handwriting, a connoisseur of faded ink. It's a strangely intimate relationship with objects that are millennia old, a silent dialogue with minds long turned to dust, but whose thoughts still breathe on these fragile sheets of papyrus. And in this quiet, focused pursuit, the hours do indeed turn into joyous days, each one bringing you closer to the heart of ancient knowledge, and deeper into the quiet satisfaction of true scholarly embrace. As the days blur into months and months into seasons, you find yourself not just absorbing the library's vast knowledge but beginning, ever so gently, to add to it. It starts subtly, almost imperceptibly, like the slow creep of ivy up an ancient wall. You're no longer just a passive recipient of wisdom, you are a quiet, thoughtful contributor. Initially, your contributions are modest. You spot a misplaced comma or, rather, its ancient Greek equivalent, a tiny dot above the line in a particularly dense philosophical treatise. You notice a scribe's error, a repeated word, or a slight miscopying of a numeral in a mathematical text. It's like finding a typo in a modern textbook, except here, a single misplaced stroke could fundamentally alter a theorem or a philosophical argument. You find yourself reaching for your own fine-tipped reed pen, dipping it carefully into the black ink, and making a tiny, almost invisible correction in the margin. Sometimes, if the mistake is egregious enough, you'll add a small, elegant obelus, a little dagger mark, next to the offending passage, signifying doubt or error, just as the great Alexandrian scholars before you had done. It's a bit like being a silent, ancient proofreader, meticulously refining the collective wisdom of the ages. You might even find yourself muttering, "Honestly, Dionysius, were you asleep when you copied this line? You had one job." But these small corrections soon evolve. As you delve deeper into your chosen field, let's imagine, for a moment, it's the intricate history of ancient astronomy, tracing the celestial observations of Babylonian priests and Egyptian stargazers, you begin to notice patterns, discrepancies, and connections that no one else seems to have fully articulated. You're not just correcting errors, you're building bridges between disparate pieces of knowledge. You might find a reference in one scroll that clarifies an obscure passage in another, seemingly unrelated text. And that's when the real work begins. You start to add scholia, those precious marginal notes that are the lifeblood of ancient scholarship. These aren't just corrections. They are your insights, your cross-references, your brief commentaries. Imagine carefully unrolling a fragile papyrus, its edges frayed like an old blanket, and seeing your own elegant script, perhaps a slightly different shade of ink, a testament to your personal touch, appearing alongside the timeless words of an ancient master. You might note, cf. Ptolemy, Almagest, Book 3, Chapter 7, pointing a future scholar to a parallel observation, or this passage contradicts the theory proposed by Eudoxus in his On Speeds. It's a dialogue across centuries, a whisper of your intellectual presence in the silent halls. The process itself is meditative. You prepare your ink, grinding the carbon soot with gum arabic, perhaps adding a touch of water for the perfect consistency. You sharpen your reed pen to a needle-fine point, ensuring it holds just the right amount of ink without blotting. Then, with infinite care, you begin to write in the margins. Sometimes, the available space is agonizingly narrow, forcing you to develop a script so tiny, so compressed, that it looks like a swarm of elegant ants marching across the papyrus. You learn to write between the lines if absolutely necessary, a technique that would make a modern typesetter weep. This dedication to microscopic precision was, in fact, a quirky hallmark of some Alexandrian scholars, who prided themselves on fitting maximum insight into minimal space, almost as if they were playing a scholarly game of Tetris with their annotations. It's a testament to how precious papyrus was, and how every millimeter of space was considered valuable real estate for knowledge. Your notes aren't just corrections or cross-references. They are also, at times, miniature essays. Perhaps you've spent weeks poring over various astronomical tables, comparing their predictions, noting their errors, and then, with a burst of clarity, you manage to synthesize a new, more accurate method for calculating planetary positions. You don't just write, "This is wrong." You write a concise, reasoned argument, demonstrating why it's wrong and offering your improved solution. This is where your deep research truly blossoms into original contribution. You're not just a reader, you're a participant in the ongoing intellectual discourse of the ancient world. The library, in its wisdom, doesn't just collect, it cultivates. When your annotations become substantial enough, when your small commentaries begin to offer genuine new perspectives, your work is recognized. You might discuss your findings with an elder scholar, perhaps one of those venerable figures whose very presence seems to hum with centuries of accumulated knowledge. They listen, they challenge, they refine. And then, if your work holds up to their rigorous scrutiny, it is deemed worthy of preservation. This is a profound moment. Your notes, once scribbled in the margins for your own benefit, are now copied by professional scribes onto fresh rolls of papyrus. They are integrated into the library's collection, sometimes as separate commentaries, sometimes as part of a new, critically edited version of the original text. You are, in essence, becoming part of the very fabric of this intellectual sanctuary. Your name, perhaps just a small note in the colophon, the scribe's finishing mark at the end of a scroll, is now linked to the monumental works you have studied. It's like your personal blog posts suddenly getting published in a revered academic journal, except the journal is the largest collection of knowledge in the ancient world. You realize the profound impact of this contribution. The Library of Alexandria was, fundamentally, a center for textual criticism. Its scholars were renowned for creating critical editions of ancient works, most famously the Homeric epic. They would compare multiple versions of a text, identify interpolations, later additions, correct errors, and establish what they believed to be the most authentic version. This mainstream historical fact underscores the very nature of your work. You are participating in a grand tradition of intellectual refinement, ensuring the purity and accuracy of the knowledge passed down through generations. Your annotations are not just personal thoughts, they are part of this meticulous, ongoing effort to preserve and perfect the written word. There's a quiet satisfaction in knowing that your insights, your tireless hours of comparison and analysis, will now guide future scholars. Someone, perhaps centuries from now, will unroll a scroll, find your carefully penned notes, and benefit from your intellectual journey. You're leaving breadcrumbs for the future, tiny beacons of understanding in the vast ocean of ancient texts. It's a legacy built not on grand pronouncements, but on diligent, often solitary work. Sometimes you even embark on writing smaller treatises of your own. These aren't necessarily groundbreaking philosophical works, but rather specialized studies, perhaps a detailed analysis of a particular star chart, or a comprehensive catalog of different methods for measuring the circumference of the Earth, comparing the approaches of Eratosthenes and others. These short works, meticulously researched and carefully argued, also find their place within the library's vast shelves. They are your direct contribution to the sum of human knowledge, born from the quiet depths of your study. You might even find yourself debating with a fellow scholar about whether the moon's influence on tides was truly understood by ancient navigators, or if their observations were merely coincidental, a delightful intellectual sparring match that hones your arguments. The true impact of these annotations and new texts, however, is often subtle. Modern textual critics still debate whether certain ancient marginalia were intended as definitive corrections or merely personal musings, reflecting the very nuanced nature of scholarship even then. You too grapple with this. Is your note a definitive statement, or merely a helpful suggestion? The answer often lies in the depth of your research and the clarity of your reasoning. You find a profound contentment in this process. It's not about fame or recognition, though a quiet nod from a senior scholar feels like a grand triumph. It's about the quiet satisfaction of contributing to something monumental, something that transcends your own fleeting existence. You are a small but vital cog in the grand machinery of human intellect, helping to ensure that the light of knowledge continues to shine, undimmed, for generations to come. Your quiet scholarly path, once a journey of discovery, has now become a journey of creation, enriching the very repository you serve, one meticulously inked note at a time. Even the most dedicated scholar, lost in the labyrinthine corridors of papyrus and the hushed sanctity of ancient thought, cannot entirely escape the world beyond the library's hallowed walls. Oh no, not in Alexandria. This isn't some remote, monastic retreat tucked away in a quiet valley. This is the beating heart of the ancient world, and its pulse, even from a distance, is undeniably loud. So, you find yourself, occasionally, drawn to the periphery of the library's grand entrance, or perhaps on a rare, sanctioned errand for a particularly obscure text that simply must be acquired from a private collection, and that's when the city truly asserts itself. It's a sensory tidal wave, a stark, almost comical contrast to the quiet, dusty calm you've grown accustomed to. You step outside, blinking a little, as if emerging from a long, delightful dream, and suddenly, the air isn't just cool and dry, it's thick with the scent of 1,000 stories. There's the salty tang of the nearby Mediterranean, mingling with the earthy aroma of spices wafting from the bustling markets, cumin, coriander, something sweet and unknown, perhaps even a hint of the pungent fish sauce, garum, which, frankly, always makes you wonder how anyone ate it with a straight face. It's like a colossal, ancient food court, but with significantly less air conditioning and a lot more donkey traffic. The sounds are a cacophony, a vibrant symphony of human endeavor. The persistent braying of donkeys, the rhythmic clang of a distant blacksmith, the high-pitched cries of street vendors hawking everything from fresh figs to tiny, intricately carved amulets. You hear a babble of languages, the lilting cadence of Greek, the guttural tones of Egyptian, the resonant Hebrew, and countless others from merchants who've sailed from the ends of the known world. It's a true melting pot, this city, a place where, as a mainstream historical fact, the diversity of its population was legendary, drawing people from across the Hellenistic world, Egypt, Judea, and beyond, all converging in this magnificent port. It's a testament to human ingenuity, really, how they managed to communicate at all without the benefit of a universal translator app. You observe the endless stream of people flowing past the library's impressive facade, a river of humanity in every shade and costume imaginable. There are the city's elite, draped in fine linen, attended by slaves, their sandals clicking purposefully on the paving stones. Then there are the grizzled sailors, their faces weathered by sun and sea, their movements still carrying the sway of a ship. You see Egyptian priests in their distinctive white robes, their heads often shaven, moving with a solemn dignity that contrasts sharply with the boisterous merchants haggling over prices with the ferocity of gladiators in the arena. Children dart through the crowds like tiny, mischievous fish, dodging carts and stray dogs with an agility that would make even the most seasoned philosopher marvel. Sometimes you catch a glimpse of an itinerant musician, perhaps a lyre player plucking a melancholic tune, or a storyteller, surrounded by a small, rapt audience, their voices rising and falling with the dramatic turns of their narrative. And occasionally, a particularly quirky or fringe tidbit, you might spot a street performer with a trained monkey, or a man with a remarkably large and surprisingly well-behaved goat on a leash, an ancient version of a bizarre pet parade, making you wonder what exactly the city's animal control policies were, if any. The city itself, beyond the immediate vicinity of the Museum, stretches out in a sprawling grid, a testament to its careful planning. You can almost feel the energy radiating from the great harbor, a colossal basin teeming with ships from every corner of the Mediterranean. Their masts pierce the sky like a forest of ancient trees, their sails, when unfurled, are canvases of white and ochre against the brilliant blue. And then there's the lighthouse, the Pharos, rising majestically from its island, a towering beacon against the horizon. Even from a distance, its sheer scale is awe-inspiring, a silent testament to Alexandrian engineering prowess, and a constant reminder that this city wasn't just about books. It was about global commerce, navigation, and projecting power. You imagine the countless sailors who relied on its guiding light, navigating by its steady glow, a comfort in the vast, inky blackness of the ancient seas. It's like the ancient world's most impressive, and probably most expensive, nightlight. You notice the rhythm of the city, too. The mornings begin with a gradual awakening, a slow rumble that builds into a crescendo of activity by midday. The afternoons, especially in the heat of summer, bring a slight lull, a collective sigh as people seek shade or retreat indoors for a siesta, much like a tired scholar might retreat to a quiet corner of the library for a quick nap, perhaps dreaming of perfectly catalogued scrolls. But as the sun begins its descent, the city reawakens, a different kind of energy emerging. The smell of cooking fires fills the air, mingling with the sweet scent of night-blooming jasmine from hidden gardens. The sounds shift too, from the harsh clamor of commerce to the softer murmur of evening conversations, the distant strains of music from a symposium, or the laughter spilling from a tavern. It's a city that truly lives, breathes, and thrives, a vibrant, chaotic organism. Sometimes, you might even find yourself contemplating the lives of these Alexandrians, the ones who aren't dedicating their days to deciphering ancient Greek philosophy or cataloging every known species of plant. What are their worries? Their joys? Do they ever spare a thought for the vast repository of knowledge that stands so prominently in their city? You see a young couple strolling hand in hand, their faces alight with an unspoken understanding, and you wonder if they're discussing the latest gossip or planning their future, utterly oblivious to the intricate debates happening within the library about the precise date of Homer's birth. It's a bit like watching a particularly engaging reality show unfold, only without the benefit of a confessional booth. And in these fleeting moments you feel a profound sense of detachment. The pursuits of the city, for all their vibrant energy, seem so very different from your own. The hustle, the bargaining, the social maneuvering, it all feels distant, a world apart. While they are building fortunes or families, you are building knowledge, painstakingly piecing together fragments of the past, ensuring the continuity of thought. You understand that both are vital, of course, but your path is undeniably the quieter, more introspective one. It's not that you disdain the city, far from it. You admire its dynamism, its sheer audacity, but it's not your world, not truly. Historians still argue whether the various ethnic and social groups in Alexandria truly integrated or remained largely separate, but for you, the scholar, the divide isn't ethnic, but intellectual. Your community is one of minds, not markets. You might even catch a glimpse of the city's grander structures beyond the Pharos, the monumental Serapeum, dedicated to the god Serapis, another intellectual and religious hub in its own right, or the sprawling royal palaces that hint at the immense power wielded by the Ptolemaic dynasty. These structures, like the library, are symbols of Alexandria's ambition, its desire to be not just a commercial center, but a cultural and intellectual superpower. But even these grand sights are fleeting observations for you. Your focus always, inevitably, returns to the scrolls, to the quiet hum of scholarly pursuit. The vibrant chaos of Alexandria is a spectacle, a fleeting show, but the true drama, for you, unfolds within the silent stacks, among the whispers of forgotten voices. And with a final inhale of the city's multifarious scents, and a last lingering glance at its bustling streets, you turn, almost instinctively, back towards the serene embrace of the library, where your true home awaits. You've found your rhythm within the library's embrace, haven't you? The initial awe has softened into a deep, abiding respect, and the vastness of the collection, once overwhelming, now feels like a comforting, boundless ocean. And in this ocean, amidst the gentle lapping of quietude, you discover something truly profound, the sweet, unburdened joy of solitude. It's not loneliness, mind you, that gnawing ache for company. Oh no, this is something far richer, a deliberate, chosen retreat into the heart of knowledge where you are never truly alone, but rather profoundly accompanied by the voices of millennia. Imagine it. The soft, diffused light filtering through high windows, illuminating dust motes dancing like tiny, ancient spirits in the air. The air itself, thick with the scent of aged papyrus, cedar oil used to preserve scrolls, and perhaps a faint, lingering whisper of beeswax from the scribe's tablets. It's a scent that now feels like home, a comforting olfactory blanket that tells your mind, ah yes, this is where the magic happens. You might be seated at a sturdy wooden carrel, worn smooth by countless elbows, or perhaps cross-legged on a low cushion, a rolled scroll resting on a small, portable desk. The silence isn't absolute, of course. That would be unnerving. Instead, it's a living silence, punctuated by the soft rustle of a turning papyrus sheet, the almost imperceptible scratch of a distant quill, or the gentle shuffle of a fellow scholar adjusting their posture. These sounds aren't disruptive. They are part of the symphony of quiet diligence, a subtle reminder that you are part of a grand, collective endeavor, even in your personal hermitage. He pushes you to delve deeper into your chosen field, encouraging you to seek out not just the well-known authors, but the obscure, the fragmented, the voices that barely whisper across the millennia. He has a peculiar habit, you notice, of sometimes talking to the scrolls themselves, murmuring questions or agreements as if the ancient authors were standing right there beside him. So, Plato, he'd say, tracing a line of text, you truly believe that forms exist independently of our perception? Tell me more, my friend, tell me more. It's a quirky habit, but it speaks volumes about his profound connection to the knowledge he served. You find yourself adopting a similar quiet reverence, almost as if the papyrus itself breathes with the spirit of its creator. Other scholars, seeing Master Lycon's interest in you, begin to offer their own insights. There's the astronomer, a wizened woman with eyes that seem to hold the entire cosmos, who shows you how to use the library's astronomical instruments to verify ancient observations. She patiently explains the intricacies of celestial mechanics, and how ancient mathematicians grappled with the vastness of the universe. You learn that sometimes the most profound insights come not from reading, but from doing, from applying the knowledge in the scrolls to the real world. You even share a laugh with her one evening when you both realize that a particular ancient text on planetary motion, revered for centuries, contains a calculation error so egregious it would make a first-year student blush. "Well," Shed chuckled, "at least they tried, bless their hearts. It's the effort that counts, right?" Then there's the linguist, a stern but fair man who drills you on obscure dialects, pushing you to understand the subtle shifts in meaning that can turn a heroic epic into a laundry list. He insists you spend hours on pronunciation, on the rhythm and cadence of ancient Greek and Egyptian, arguing that to truly understand a text, you must hear it, even if only in your mind's ear. He'll make you repeat a single line of Homer until the meter is perfect, until you can feel the weight of each word, the ancient poet's breath in your own lungs. It's exhausting, but you realize how much deeper your understanding becomes when you engage with the text on such a primal level. You even learn a few ancient tongue twisters, which, surprisingly, are just as difficult and silly as their modern counterparts, proving that humanity's capacity for verbal acrobatics transcends millennia. These mentors don't just offer intellectual guidance, they offer a profound sense of belonging. You are no longer just in the library, you are of the library. You are part of a lineage, a chain of knowledge that stretches back through time and reaches forward into the future. They teach you patience, not just with difficult texts, but with yourself. They teach you humility, reminding you that no matter how much you learn, the vast ocean of the unknown will always dwarf your puddle of understanding. They teach you the sheer, unadulterated joy of discovery, the thrill of uncovering a forgotten truth, of piecing together a puzzle that has lain scattered for centuries. The quiet contentment you found in solitude is now enriched by the shared pursuit, the silent camaraderie of minds dedicated to the same lofty goal. You see yourself reflected in their aged eyes, the same burning curiosity, the same unyielding dedication. They are living proof that a life devoted to the quiet pursuit of knowledge is not a life of isolation, but a life of profound connection, a conversation across centuries, a whisper of understanding passed from one generation to the next. You realize that the greatest treasure in the library isn't just the scrolls themselves, but the living, breathing scholars who dedicate their lives to tending them, like gardeners of the mind, nurturing the seeds of wisdom for all of eternity. As your own research deepens, pulling you further into the quiet embrace of ancient thought, you become an increasingly frequent visitor to a particular wing of the library, one that hums with a different kind of industry. This isn't the hushed realm of readers and ponderers, but the vibrant, disciplined workshop of the scribes. You've seen them before, of course, scattered throughout the main halls, but here, in their dedicated scriptorium, their collective energy is palpable, even if the sounds they produce are meticulously muted. Imagine, if you will, a vast, airy chamber, bathed in the soft, diffused light filtering through high windows. The air itself feels thick with the faint, earthy scent of papyrus and the metallic tang of iron gall ink. Rows upon rows of low, sturdy wooden desks stretch out, each occupied by a figure bent in concentration, their backs often curved like question marks over their work. These are the unsung heroes, the human photocopiers of the ancient world, ensuring that every word, every idea, every fleeting thought committed to papyrus has a chance at immortality. It's like watching a perfectly synchronized, extremely slow-motion ballet, where every movement is precise, deliberate, and utterly vital. You often find yourself drawn to the edge of this bustling quietude, observing their tireless work. It's a hypnotic rhythm. A scribe dips a reed pen, or calamus, into a small inkwell, the tip emerging dark and glistening. Then, with a gentle, almost reverent touch, they begin to form characters on the prepared papyrus sheet. There's no hurried scratching, no frantic scrawl. Each letter is a miniature work of art, carefully crafted, a testament to years of practice and an almost innate understanding of the script. You can almost hear the soft shhh as the reed glides across the fibrous surface, a sound so subtle it blends into the ambient hum of concentration. The papyrus itself is a marvel. You've learned that it's made from the pith of the papyrus plant, sliced into thin strips, laid crisscross, and then pressed and dried. The resulting sheets are surprisingly durable, yet also delicate, and their pale, creamy surface is the perfect canvas for the dark, rich ink. Watching the scribes work, you realize the sheer physical effort involved. It's not just about neat handwriting, it's about maintaining a consistent hand for hours on end, day after day. Your own fingers cramp after a few hours of copying, but these individuals are built for it, their muscles trained to endure the repetitive strain. You sometimes wonder if they ever get what we'd call scribe's elbow or perhaps ancient carpal tunnel syndrome from all that meticulous penmanship. Probably, but unlike us, they couldn't just pop an ibuprofen. The process is far more complex than simply copying. Before a scribe even begins, a master copy, often a prized original or a particularly well-preserved edition, is laid out. Then, lines are carefully ruled on the blank papyrus sheets, sometimes with a lead stylus, ensuring uniform margins and straight rows of text. This isn't just for aesthetics, it's crucial for legibility and consistency across multiple copies. Imagine trying to read a scroll where the lines wander like a drunken camel. A nightmare, right? And the ink. It's not just a simple black. You've seen the various shades, from deep charcoal to a lighter, almost sepia tone, depending on the mixture. The standard ink is usually carbon-based, made from soot or lampblack mixed with water and a binder like gum arabic. For titles, chapter headings, or important words, red ink, derived from ochre or cinnabar, is often used, adding a vibrant splash of color to the otherwise monochrome text. It's like the ancient world's version of bolding or highlighting, a subtle visual cue that whispers, "Pay attention here." What strikes you most is the sheer volume of material they process. The library's ambition, a mainstream historical fact you've come to appreciate, was to collect all the world's knowledge. This wasn't just about acquiring original scrolls. It was about copying them, translating them, and then making more copies to disseminate or to keep as backups. Think of it. Every time a ship arrived in Alexandria with new texts, those texts would be borrowed, meticulously copied, and then returned to their owners, with the library keeping the new copy. This was how knowledge was amassed and spread, one careful stroke of the pen at a time. It's mind-boggling to consider the number of human hours invested in this colossal undertaking. We complain about our Wi-Fi speed, but they were literally hand-copying the internet. Occasionally, you catch a glimpse of a scribe making a subtle correction, scraping away a mistake with a small knife, or carefully writing over an error. Proofreading is an arduous, multi-layered process. Often, one scribe copies, and another, or even a team of others, meticulously compares the new copy against the original, syllable by syllable, character by character. It's like the most intense game of spot the difference you could ever imagine, with the fate of ancient wisdom hanging in the balance. Historians still argue whether the error rate of ancient scribes was surprisingly low or if significant textual corruption was an inevitable part of the process. You can see how easy it would be to miss a single dot or misinterpret a similar-looking character, especially over thousands of lines of text. One day, you notice a younger scribe, perhaps still an apprentice, looking rather forlornly at a section of papyrus. He's clearly made a significant error. An elder scribe approaches, not with anger, but with a quiet, reassuring presence. He points to the mistake, then gently guides the younger man's hand, showing him how to carefully excise the errant section and patch in a new piece of papyrus, almost seamlessly. It's a reminder that this isn't just a mechanical process. It's a craft passed down through generations, steeped in patience and an unwavering commitment to accuracy. You also learn about some of the quirks of the scribal life. A quirky or fringe tidbit you pick up is that scribes would sometimes leave colophons at the end of their work, brief personal notes, sometimes giving thanks to the gods, sometimes complaining about the difficulty of the text, or even noting the exact date and time they finished. Imagine finishing a 500-page book today and writing, "Finally done with this beast. My hand hurts and I need a snack. Bob, 2:37 a.m., Tuesday." It's these tiny, human touches that pierce through the centuries, reminding you that these diligent workers were real people, with real frustrations and small triumph. You even hear a whispered tale of a scribe who, after copying a particularly dull philosophical treatise, drew a tiny, mischievous caricature of his supervisor in the margin. A true rebel. The air in the scriptorium is almost always still, broken only by the soft scratching, the occasional rustle of a turning page, and the quiet murmurs of proofreaders. Yet, beneath this tranquility lies an immense intellectual effort. These scribes are not merely transcribers, they are the guardians of knowledge. Without their painstaking efforts, countless works of philosophy, science, literature, and history would have vanished into the sands of time, lost forever. They are the human firewalls against oblivion. They are the reason we can still read Homer, Plato, and Euclid today. They are the unsung heroes of intellectual continuity. You watch as a finished scroll is carefully rolled, tied with a string, and a small tag, or syllabus, is attached, identifying its contents. It's an act of completion, of preservation, a small victory in the endless battle against decay and forgetfulness. Each rolled scroll isn't just a document. It's a time capsule, meticulously prepared and sealed for future generations. It's a profound thought. These scrolls, handled with such care, might one day be unrolled by someone centuries from now, their words bridging the vast chasm of time. Sometimes you see scribes working on translations, transforming Greek texts into Latin, or Egyptian hieroglyphs into Greek. This adds another layer of complexity and potential for error, but also an incredible avenue for cross-cultural knowledge exchange. It's like the ancient world's Google Translate, but infinitely slower and requiring immense human ingenuity. You realize that a significant portion of the library's collection is not just original works, but meticulously crafted translations, making knowledge accessible to a wider array of scholars from different linguistic backgrounds. It's truly a global effort, considering the limitations of ancient communication. The quiet, relentless dedication of the scribes is a powerful lesson in the value of incremental effort. Each tiny character, each carefully copied line, builds into a monumental achievement. There's no grand fanfare, no heroic battles, just the steady, unwavering commitment to the written word. It's a kind of quiet heroism, often overlooked, but absolutely foundational to the intellectual life of Alexandria and, indeed, the entire ancient world. They are the silent engines of enlightenment, tirelessly turning the gears of knowledge dissemination. You find a deep respect growing within you for these meticulous artisans, these human bridges to the past, whose diligent preservation ensures that the legacy of every written word endures, long after its original author has turned to dust. You've settled into the rhythm of the library, haven't you? The grand halls, the familiar scent of papyrus and olive oil, the hushed murmurs of fellow scholars, it all feels like home now. But even in a place so meticulously organized, so utterly devoted to the preservation of knowledge, there are always corners. Forgotten spaces, places where the light doesn't quite reach, and the dust motes dance in a way that suggests they've been undisturbed for centuries. These are the realms where true magic, the quiet, scholarly kind, often happens. It's not a planned expedition, typically. You're not setting out with a map marked, X marks the spot for lost texts. No, it's usually during a routine inventory, perhaps a particularly dusty section of the works of minor poets, that rarely sees a reader, or maybe a quiet afternoon spent reshelving texts that have been returned after extensive study. You might notice a discrepancy in the shelving, a slight shift in the wall, or a section that simply doesn't appear on any of the updated Pinocs. The grand catalogue compiled by Callimachus, which, while monumental, was also, let's be honest, a never-ending work in progress. Historians still argue whether the Pinocs was ever truly exhaustive, or if these forgotten corners were simply too chaotic to document fully. It's almost as if the previous librarian decided organized chaos was a valid cataloging system for these particular shelves. You know, like that one drawer in your kitchen that just collects things. One particularly warm afternoon, when the air outside hangs heavy with the scent of the sea and the distant cries of market vendors, you find yourself in a rarely visited annex, tucked away behind a row of particularly dense astronomical treatises. You're meant to be checking for signs of damp, a constant battle in Alexandria's humid climate. Your fingers, tracing the cool stone of the wall, find a faint seam, almost imperceptible. A slight push, and a section of the wall, disguised expertly as part of the shelving, groans softly inward. It doesn't swing wide with dramatic flair, mind you, but rather reveals a narrow, unlit passage, smelling distinctively of ancient dryness, of forgotten wood, and the deep, earthy aroma of undisturbed papyrus. You retrieve a small oil lamp from your satchel, a scholar's essential tool, right up there with a sharpened quill, and carefully step into the gloom. The passage opens into a small, low-ceilinged chamber, not much larger than a modest study. Here, the shelves are rougher, less polished than those in the main halls, and they sag under the weight of scrolls that are clearly ancient, even by the library's standards. A thick layer of dust coats everything, shimmering like gold in the lamp's gentle glow as you disturb it with your breath. This, you realize with a quiet thrill, is a true alcove. A forgotten sanctuary within the sanctuary. Your heart beats a little faster, a quiet drum against your ribs. This isn't just about finding another scroll, it's about touching a piece of history that has been hidden, perhaps for centuries. You reach for the nearest scroll, a thick cylinder of dark, aged papyrus, secured with a brittle leather thong. The very act of taking it from the shelf feels like disturbing a deep slumber. You gently unroll a small section. The ink, though faded, is still legible. It's a philosophical dialogue, but the name of the author isn't immediately familiar. As you scan the opening lines, a shiver goes down your spine. This isn't a copy of a known work. This appears to be an original, or at least a very early, unique manuscript of a philosopher whose name is barely a whisper in the annals of common knowledge. It's like finding a lost demo tape from a band you thought only had one album. You spend hours in that hidden room, the outside world fading into an irrelevant hum. The air is cool and still, the only sound the soft rustle of papyrus as you carefully unroll one scroll after another. Some are fragments, tantalizing glimpses of lost plays or epic poems. One contains what appears to be a detailed account of a peculiar ancient festival, complete with instructions for a rather elaborate dance involving fruit and very loud flutes. Another, surprisingly, seems to be a collection of ancient riddles, some so obscure you wonder if they were ever meant to be solved, or if the ancient equivalent of a stand-up comedian was just having a particularly bad day. You can almost hear the crickets chirping after the punchline. Then, you stumble upon something truly remarkable. A series of scrolls, carefully bundled together, almost as if someone had intended to retrieve them but never did. As you gently pry open the outermost layer, you reveal a title written in a meticulous, almost artistic hand, on the construction of automatons and self-moving devices. Your breath catches. This isn't mere theory, it's a practical guide. The initial pages detail the mechanics of a water clock far more intricate than any you've encountered, followed by diagrams for what appears to be an automated temple door, opening and closing as if by divine intervention, and even a small, steam-powered bird that could sing. This is the kind of ingenuity that whispers of minds centuries ahead of their time, the likes of Hero of Alexandria, or even earlier, whose work sometimes hinted at such marvels but rarely provided such granular detail. This is where the true beauty of the library, and your quiet life within it, truly shines. The Ptolemies, you recall, were notoriously thorough, demanding that all ships docking in Alexandria surrender their scrolls for copying. It was a kind of intellectual customs duty, ensuring that the library truly housed the collected wisdom of the world. Yet, despite these immense acquisition efforts, despite the legions of scribes and scholars who dedicated their lives to cataloging and preserving, there were always secrets. These hidden alcoves, these forgotten bundles, are the proof that even the most comprehensive systems can miss a treasure or two. It's like finding a first edition of a classic novel tucked away in a dusty attic, unsigned and unheralded, waiting for the right pair of eyes. This deep quiet allows your thoughts to unfurl, to stretch out like sun-warmed cats, unhurried and unburdened by the clamor of the city outside. You remember those fleeting glimpses of Alexandrian life, the shouts of merchants in the agora, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the murmur of 1,000 conversations cascading through narrow streets. It's a vibrant, chaotic symphony, undoubtedly. But here, within these hallowed walls, all that external noise simply fades away, a distant echo that no longer demands your attention. It's like finally turning off all your digital notifications and realizing just how much mental bandwidth you've suddenly reclaimed. You don't realize how much background noise you're carrying until it's gone, do you? And suddenly, your mind, freed from the constant barrage of stimuli, can truly listen to the ancient voices preserved in ink. You find yourself sinking into the work, the hours dissolving like grains of sand through an hourglass. There's no clock ticking loudly here, no urgent appointments demanding your presence. Time becomes a fluid concept, bending to the rhythm of your intellectual pursuit. You might spend an entire morning tracing the intricate logic of an Aristotelian argument, or an afternoon meticulously comparing different astronomical observations from Babylonian and Egyptian texts. The pursuit of knowledge here isn't a race, it's a deep, meditative dive. You aren't just reading words on a page, you are engaging in a silent conversation with minds separated by centuries, sometimes millennia. Imagine trying to decipher a cryptic passage, perhaps a medical text describing an ailment, and suddenly, a phrase clicks into place, illuminating a forgotten treatment or a lost understanding of anatomy. It's a quiet, internal cheer, a tiny spark of triumph that resonates only within your own mind, but it's more satisfying than any public applause. This profound contentment springs from the sheer act of understanding, of connecting the dots across vast intellectual landscapes. You might be poring over a scroll, meticulously copied by a dedicated scribe centuries before, perhaps even by someone whose name is now lost to time, but whose careful hand preserved the very words you now contemplate. The library, in its zenith, was reputed to hold hundreds of thousands of scrolls, perhaps even nearing 500,000, though historians still argue whether this figure represents distinct works or individual scrolls, as many works spanned multiple roles. Regardless, the sheer volume is staggering, and you are but one tiny, dedicated cog in this monumental engine of preservation and discovery. And yet, your individual contribution, however small, feels immeasurably significant. You are not just consuming knowledge, you are actively participating in its perpetuation. There's a unique peace that settles over you as you realize the sheer scale of human endeavor encapsulated within these walls. Every scroll, every fragmented papyrus, represents countless hours of thought, debate, observation, and meticulous transcription. It's a testament to humanity's relentless drive to understand, to categorize, to question. And you, in your quiet corner, are a part of that grand, continuous narrative. You might encounter a particularly tricky passage, a phrase so convoluted it feels like the author deliberately tried to tangle your brain. You squint, you reread, you consult a commentary, and then, slowly, painstakingly, the meaning begins to unfurl. It's like untangling a particularly stubborn knot, only to find a perfectly formed bow underneath. A little victory just for you. The solitude also grants you the luxury of intense, uninterrupted focus. No one is tapping you on the shoulder to ask if you've seen the latest gossip from the royal court. No one is complaining about the quality of the communal lentils. Your mind is free to roam, to chase down every tangent, to follow every thread of curiosity wherever it leads. You can spend an entire afternoon pondering the subtle differences in philosophical schools of thought, or tracing the evolution of a mathematical theorem through different cultures. It's a privilege, really, this deep immersion, this ability to simply think without interruption. It's almost like the ancient equivalent of putting on noise-canceling headphones and getting into a flow state, only instead of your favorite playlist, you're listening to the silent symphony of wisdom. Sometimes you might even find yourself chuckling softly to yourself, a tiny, private moment of amusement. Perhaps you've stumbled upon a particularly scathing ancient critique of a rival philosopher, or a surprisingly relatable complaint about the difficulty of learning a new language. You realize that despite the millennia separating you, the human experience, with all its foibles and triumphs, remains remarkably consistent. Or maybe you're just amused by the sheer audacity of some ancient scholar who wrote an entire treatise on the optimal way to arrange your scrolls. Ah, yes, you might think, a small smile playing on your lips, the original organization guru. You wonder if they had a problem with scroll sprawl back then, too. This quiet pursuit of knowledge becomes a form of spiritual nourishment. It's not just about accumulating facts. It's about expanding your mind, refining your understanding of the world, and connecting with the vast tapestry of human intellect. The peace you feel isn't merely the absence of noise, it's the presence of profound engagement. It's the calm satisfaction of a mind fully occupied, fully challenged, and fully at peace with its chosen purpose. You've found your anchor, your sanctuary, not just a physical space, but a state of being. And in this state, surrounded by the silent, eloquent voices of the past, you feel an unshakable sense of belonging, a quiet conviction that this, precisely this, is where you are meant to be. The quiet hum of the library, once merely the backdrop to your solitary pursuits, begins to shift, to subtly alter its melody. You've been so absorbed, so deeply ensconced in your chosen niche, that you almost didn't notice the subtle nods, the lingering gazes, the small, almost imperceptible invitations from the elder scholars who glide through the stacks like ancient, wise sea creatures in their element. You are no longer just another diligent new face, fumbling with papyrus and ink. You're becoming known not for grand pronouncements, but for your quiet dedication, your methodical approach, your seemingly endless capacity to simply be with the scrolls. And then it happens. Perhaps it's a particularly knotty passage you've been wrestling with, a phrase in an obscure philosophical treatise that simply refuses to yield its meaning. You've consulted every available lexicon, cross-referenced every related text, and still, the words sit there, stubbornly opaque, like a particularly stubborn jar of pickled olives. You sigh, a soft exhalation that barely disturbs the dust motes dancing in the shafts of light. And that's when a shadow falls over your workspace, not an ominous one, but a gentle, comforting one. You look up to see an old scholar, his face a roadmap of wrinkles etched by years of focused squinting at tiny script, his eyes bright and curious, like a particularly well-read owl. Let's call him Master Lycon. He's one of those figures you've seen around, always with a scroll tucked under his arm, seemingly capable of existing on nothing but air and the faint scent of cedar oil. He doesn't say anything, just gestures vaguely at the offending scroll with a gnarled finger. You point to the problematic line, feeling a blush creep up your neck, as if you've been caught in some intellectual faux pas. He leans closer, his breath smelling faintly of dried figs and ancient wisdom, and his voice, when he speaks, is a low, gravelly murmur, like stones tumbling gently in a stream. "Ah, yes," he rumbles, "the very same phrase that gave me sleepless nights for a week, some 40 years ago." And just like that, the barrier is gone. This isn't a formal classroom, mind you. This is Alexandria, the intellectual heart of the world, where the pursuit of knowledge is a living, breathing thing and mentorship happens organically, like moss growing on a very old, very wise tree. Master Lycon doesn't lecture. He guides. He might sit beside you for an hour, occasionally interjecting with a quiet, "Consider the particle here," or "Have you explored the nuances of this verb in the Attic dialect?" It's less about him giving you the answer, and more about him pointing you towards the path where the answer might be hiding, perhaps under a particularly dusty rhetorical flourish. You quickly learn that even the most brilliant minds need a good editor, or at least a kindly nudge in the right direction. It's like having a human search engine, but one that also offers you a cup of herbal tea and a deeply philosophical anecdote about the time he mistakenly catalogued a recipe for fermented fish sauce as a treatise on Stoic ethics. Good times. He introduces you to the subtle art of reading between the lines, of understanding not just what an author wrote, but why they wrote it and what biases, political climates, or personal quirks might have shaped their words. He teaches you to question everything, even the most revered texts. The ancients were brilliant, yes, he'd murmur, tapping a worn scroll. But they were also human. Prone to error, flights of fancy, and occasionally, just plain getting it wrong. It's a revelation, this permission to critically engage, to not just absorb but to interrogate. You learn that a truly quiet scholar isn't just a sponge, but a filter, sifting through the vast ocean of information for the pure, sparkling truth. Your methods, which you once thought were quite refined, are now put through a gentle, yet rigorous, overhaul. Master Lycon shows you how to hold a quill so that the ink flows just so, without blotching. He demonstrates a technique for unrolling particularly fragile scrolls that minimizes wear, a delicate dance of fingers and thumbs that looks simple but requires years of practice. You discover that the library itself, the great Mouseion, which, as you learn, is not just a building but a vast research institution where scholars lived, studied, and collaborated, truly one of the world's first universities, has its own hidden rhythms and secret pathways. Historians still argue whether the Pinox, the library's legendary catalog, were a true subject-based catalog or more of an author index, and how widely accessible they truly were to all scholars, but Master Lycon seems to possess an internal map of every single scroll, every single alcove, every single cross-reference. It's like he has a mental Wi-Fi connection directly to the collective consciousness of all knowledge. He pushes you to delve deeper into your chosen field, encouraging you to seek out not just the well-known authors, but the obscure, the fragmented, the voices that barely whisper across the millennia. He has a peculiar habit, you notice, of sometimes talking to the scrolls themselves, murmuring questions or agreements as if the ancient authors were standing right there beside him. "So, Plato," he'd say, tracing a line of text, "you truly believe that forms exist independently of our perception? Tell me more, my friend, tell me more." It's a quirky habit, but it speaks volumes about his profound connection to the knowledge he served. You find yourself adopting a similar quiet reverence, almost as if the papyrus itself breathes with the spirit of its creator. Other scholars, seeing Master Lycon's interest in you, begin to offer their own insights. There's the astronomer, a wizened woman with eyes that seem to hold the entire cosmos, who shows you how to use the library's astronomical instruments to verify ancient observations. She patiently explains the intricacies of celestial mechanics, and how ancient mathematicians grappled with the vastness of the universe. You learn that sometimes the most profound insights come not from reading, but from doing, from applying the knowledge in the scrolls to the real world. You even share a laugh with her one evening when you both realize that a particular ancient text on planetary motion, revered for centuries, contains a calculation error so egregious it would make a first-year student blush. "Well," Shed chuckled, "at least they tried, bless their hearts. It's the effort that counts, right?" Then there's the linguist, a stern but fair man who drills you on obscure dialects, pushing you to understand the subtle shifts in meaning that can turn a heroic epic into a laundry list. He insists you spend hours on pronunciation, on the rhythm and cadence of ancient Greek and Egyptian, arguing that to truly understand a text, you must hear it, even if only in your mind's ear. He'll make you repeat a single line of Homer until the meter is perfect, until you can feel the weight of each word, the ancient poet's breath in your own lungs. It's exhausting, but you realize how much deeper your understanding becomes when you engage with the text on such a primal level. You even learn a few ancient tongue twisters, which, surprisingly, are just as difficult and silly as their modern counterparts, proving that humanity's capacity for verbal acrobatics transcends millennia. These mentors don't just offer intellectual guidance, they offer a profound sense of belonging. You are no longer just in the library, you are of the library. You are part of a lineage, a chain of knowledge that stretches back through time and reaches forward into the future. They teach you patience, not just with difficult texts, but with yourself. They teach you humility, reminding you that no matter how much you learn, the vast ocean of the unknown will always dwarf your puddle of understanding. They teach you the sheer, unadulterated joy of discovery, the thrill of uncovering a forgotten truth, of piecing together a puzzle that has lain scattered for centuries. The quiet contentment you found in solitude is now enriched by the shared pursuit, the silent camaraderie of minds dedicated to the same lofty goal. You see yourself reflected in their aged eyes, the same burning curiosity, the same unyielding dedication. They are living proof that a life devoted to the quiet pursuit of knowledge is not a life of isolation, but a life of profound connection, a conversation across centuries, a whisper of understanding passed from one generation to the next. You realize that the greatest treasure in the library isn't just the scrolls themselves, but the living, breathing scholars who dedicate their lives to tending them, like gardeners of the mind, nurturing the seeds of wisdom for all of eternity. The quiet hum of the library, once merely the backdrop to your solitary pursuits, begins to shift, to subtly alter its melody. You've been so absorbed, so deeply ensconced in your chosen niche, that you almost didn't notice the subtle nods, the lingering gazes, the small, almost imperceptible invitations from the elder scholars who glide through the stacks like ancient, wise sea creatures in their element. You are no longer just another diligent new face, fumbling with papyrus and ink. You're becoming known not for grand pronouncements, but for your quiet dedication, your methodical approach, your seemingly endless capacity to simply be with the scrolls. And then it happens. Perhaps it's a particularly knotty passage you've been wrestling with, a phrase in an obscure philosophical treatise that simply refuses to yield its meaning. You've consulted every available lexicon, cross-referenced every related text, and still, the words sit there, stubbornly opaque, like a particularly stubborn jar of pickled olives. You sigh, a soft exhalation that barely disturbs the dust motes dancing in the shafts of light. And that's when a shadow falls over your workspace, not an ominous one, but a gentle, comforting one. You look up to see an old scholar, his face a roadmap of wrinkles etched by years of focused squinting at tiny script, his eyes bright and curious, like a particularly well-read owl. Let's call him Master Lycon. He's one of those figures you've seen around, always with a scroll tucked under his arm, seemingly capable of existing on nothing but air and the faint scent of cedar oil. He doesn't say anything, just gestures vaguely at the offending scroll with a gnarled finger. You point to the problematic line, feeling a blush creep up your neck, as if you've been caught in some intellectual faux pas. He leans closer, his breath smelling faintly of dried figs and ancient wisdom, and his voice, when he speaks, is a low, gravelly murmur, like stones tumbling gently in a stream. "Ah, yes," he rumbles, "the very same phrase that gave me sleepless nights for a week, some 40 years ago. And just like that, the barrier is gone. This isn't a formal classroom, mind you. This is Alexandria, the intellectual heart of the world, where the pursuit of knowledge is a living, breathing thing, and mentorship happens organically, like moss growing on a very old, very wise tree. Master Lycon doesn't lecture. He guides. He might sit beside you for an hour, occasionally interjecting with a quiet, "Consider the particle here," or "Have you explored the nuances of this verb in the Attic dialect?" It's less about him giving you the answer, and more about him pointing you towards the path where the answer might be hiding, perhaps under a particularly dusty rhetorical flourish. You quickly learn that even the most brilliant minds needed a good editor, or at least a kindly nudge in the right direction. It's like having a human search engine, but one that also offers you a cup of herbal tea and a deeply philosophical anecdote about the time he mistakenly catalogued a recipe for fermented fish sauce as a treatise on Stoic ethics. Good times. He introduces you to the subtle art of reading between the lines, of understanding not just what an author wrote, but why they wrote it and what biases, political climates, or personal quirks might have shaped their words. He teaches you to question everything, even the most revered texts. The ancients were brilliant, yes, he'd murmur, tapping a worn scroll. But they were also human. Prone to error, flights of fancy, and occasionally, just plain getting it wrong. It's a revelation, this permission to critically engage, to not just absorb but to interrogate. You learn that a truly quiet scholar isn't just a sponge, but a filter, sifting through the vast ocean of information for the pure, sparkling truth. Your methods, which you once thought were quite refined, are now put through a gentle, yet rigorous, overhaul. Master Lycon shows you how to hold a quill so that the ink flows just so, without blotching. He demonstrates a technique for unrolling particularly fragile scrolls that minimizes wear, a delicate dance of fingers and thumbs that looks simple but requires years of practice. You discover that the library itself, the great Mouseion, which, as you learn, is not just a building but a vast research institution where scholars lived, studied, and collaborated, truly one of the world's first universities, has its own hidden rhythms and secret pathways. Historians still argue whether the Pinox, the library's legendary catalog, were a true subject-based catalog or more of an author index, and how widely accessible they truly were to all scholars, but Master Lycon seems to possess an internal map of every single scroll, every single alcove, every single cross-reference. It's like he has a mental Wi-Fi connection directly to the collective consciousness of all knowledge. You carefully note the location of each scroll, making small sketches of their unique bindings or identifying marks. Your hands are covered in ancient dust, your eyes slightly strained from the dim light, but you feel an exhilaration that no grand banquet or public lecture could ever provide. This is the quiet, profound reward of the scholar, to be the first in centuries to touch these words, to glimpse these thoughts, to bring them back into the light of shared knowledge. Your back might protest a little as you carefully rebundle the most fragile finds, but your mind is practically doing a happy dance. Though perhaps a very quiet, scholarly happy dance. You emerge from the hidden chamber hours later, blinking in the softer light of the main library, a small stack of the most vital new finds cradled carefully in your arms. The familiar sounds of the library, the scratching of quills, the rustle of papyrus, the low hum of discussion seem to welcome these silent newcomers. You know that the process of integrating them will be long and meticulous, cleaning, copying, analyzing, debating their authenticity and significance. But for now, you simply hold them, a tangible link to voices long silenced, now ready to speak again. And you know with a deep certainty that somewhere else within these vast walls, other secrets still lie waiting, patiently, for the gentle touch of a curious hand. You stand amidst the silent stacks, the faint scent of aged papyrus and beeswax a constant companion, and a profound realization settles over you like the soft Alexandrian dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun. This isn't just a building, is it? This isn't merely a vast, incredibly well-organized collection of ancient wisdom. Oh no, my quiet scholar, you begin to grasp something far grander. You see the Library of Alexandria not as a static monument, but as a colossal, pulsating heart. It beats with the rhythm of countless minds, past and present, and its pulse, its very lifeblood, radiates outward, a wave of enlightenment washing over the entire ancient world. Imagine, for a moment, the sheer audacity of it. In a world where information traveled at the speed of a camel or a galley ship, where literacy was a luxury and books were hand-copied treasures, Alexandria built a beacon. It was designed, quite literally, to pull in all the knowledge of the known world, digest it, refine it, and then, crucially, send it back out. It's like the ancient world's internet service provider, but with more actual scroll-based downloads and far fewer pop-up ads for enchanted amulet. From your vantage point, deep within its hallowed halls, you see the mechanisms of this intellectual dissemination at play every single day. You watch as scholars, their faces etched with the fatigue of long journeys, arrive at the gates, clutching precious scrolls or even just ideas, eager to contribute or absorb. They come from Athens, from Rome, from Babylon, from the distant reaches of India and the Nile's southern bends. Each arrival is a tiny infusion of new thought, a fresh perspective, a different way of looking at the stars or the human body. And then, after months or years of study, they depart, their minds brimming, their satchels heavier with copies of texts they've meticulously transcribed, ready to carry that light back to their own lands. You realize you are one of these conduits, a living wire in a vast, ancient network. Think of the ripples. When Eratosthenes, a luminary of this very institution, stood outside under the Alexandrian sun and, using simple geometry and a well in Syene, calculated the Earth's circumference with astonishing accuracy, a mainstream historical fact that still makes modern engineers nod in appreciation, that wasn't just a fun little parlor trick for the Ptolemaic court. Oh no. That knowledge, copied onto countless scrolls, traveled. It reshaped maps, informed navigators, and fundamentally altered humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmos. Imagine a Roman merchant, navigating the Mediterranean, relying on charts that had been subtly improved by Alexandrian geography, or a Greek philosopher in Sicily debating the true scale of the world, armed with figures born right here. It was profoundly practical, not just academic. And it wasn't just about the big, flashy scientific breakthroughs. The library also radiated enlightenment in quieter, more pervasive ways. Consider the very act of standardization. Callimachus, the chief librarian for a time, famously undertook the monumental task of creating the Pinox, a comprehensive catalogue of all the works in the library, organized by author and subject. This was a quirky, fringe tidbit for its time, a revolutionary step in information management. Before the Pinox, finding a specific text in a vast collection was like trying to find a needle in a haystack made entirely of other needles, all slightly different shades of brown. But with this system, knowledge became accessible. It became searchable. This organizational innovation, born within these walls, influenced how other emerging libraries, like the one in Pergamum, structured their own collections, creating a ripple effect of order that made global scholarship more efficient. It was the ancient world's Dewey Decimal System, but with more actual dust and a higher chance of running into a famous philosopher. You see the library's influence in the very architecture of Alexandria itself. The city isn't just a port, it's a living testament to intellectual curiosity. The Mouseion Museum, of which the library is the crown jewel, isn't just a passive repository. It's a bustling campus, alive with lecture halls, astronomical observatories, dissecting rooms for medical students, botanical gardens, and even a small zoo. This comprehensive approach, combining research, teaching, and practical application, was groundbreaking. It meant that a student of medicine could learn theory from scrolls, then observe dissections, and finally, perhaps, study the medicinal properties of plants in the gardens. It was an integrated intellectual ecosystem, radiating not just abstract knowledge, but practical, applicable wisdom. You often overhear discussions, sometimes hushed, sometimes boisterous, about the library's acquisition policies. Historians still argue whether the legendary practice of impounding every ship's scrolls that docked in Alexandria, copying them, and then returning the originals, or sometimes keeping the originals and returning the copies, a cheeky move if ever there was one, was a regular, enforced policy or an occasional, ambitious flourish by a particularly zealous Ptolemy. Either way, it speaks volumes about the insatiable hunger for knowledge that defined this place. Imagine being a merchant, just wanting to offload your spices, and suddenly your personal reading collection is being held hostage for a quick copy. Oh, you thought you were just transporting goods? Nope, you're unwittingly carrying precious intellectual cargo for the greater good, my friend. The very prestige of the library drew the brightest minds. Euclid laid the foundations of geometry here. Eratosthenes measured the earth. Herophilus and Erasistratus pioneered anatomical studies. Archimedes himself, though primarily based in Syracuse, spent time studying and corresponding with scholars here, his brilliant mind sparking off the intellectual energy of this place. Their discoveries, meticulously recorded and copied, didn't stay within these walls. They were sent as gifts to other rulers, traded with other scholars, and disseminated through the networks of traveling students. This wasn't just about hoarding knowledge, it was about broadcasting it, loud and clear, across the ancient world. You recognize that the library's influence extended beyond academic pursuit. The Ptolemaic pharaohs, who funded this colossal enterprise, understood its immense power, not just for prestige, but for practical governance. Knowledge of navigation, astronomy, engineering, and agriculture, all cultivated here, directly aided the prosperity and stability of their realm. The library wasn't a detached ivory tower. It was deeply intertwined with the economic and political heartbeat of Alexandria and, by extension, the Hellenistic world. It was a tool of soft power, a symbol of intellectual supremacy, making Alexandria not just a great port, but a veritable intellectual superpower. Sometimes, as you copy a particularly profound philosophical treatise, you imagine the journey that scroll will take. Perhaps it will end up in a private collection in Rome, influencing the thoughts of a young senator. Maybe it will be read in a lecture hall in Antioch, sparking a new school of thought. Or perhaps it will simply be cherished by a solitary scholar in a distant land, finding solace and wisdom in its words, just as you do. The thought gives you a quiet sense of satisfaction, a feeling of being part of something far, far larger than yourself, larger than even this magnificent building. You are a cog in this grand machine, a tiny, diligent part of the ancient world's most powerful engine of enlightenment. Your quiet work, your meticulous copying, your careful annotations, they all contribute to that outward flow. You are helping to turn the library's immense reservoir of knowledge into a river, nourishing the intellectual landscape of civilizations far and wide. The air around you, thick with the scent of old paper and new ideas, hums with this energy. It is the sound of Alexandria's intellectual heartbeat, strong and steady, radiating light across the ancient world, one carefully copied scroll, one brilliant mind, one profound discovery at a time. It's a pretty good gig, all things considered. No dress code, excellent benefits if you count endless knowledge, and the commute is just a quiet stroll through the grand halls. The parchment under your fingertips still feels cool, familiar, the scent of ancient ink a comforting lullaby in the vast, echoing halls. Yet, even within the library's thick, protective walls, a subtle shift begins to permeate the very air you breathe. It's not a dramatic tremor, no sudden earthquake of political upheaval, but rather a slow, insidious seep, like dampness rising from the foundations, hinting at a change in the season, or perhaps, a permanent alteration of the landscape outside. You first notice it in the quality of the light, paradoxically. Not the sun itself, of course, but the way it seems to catch the dust motes dancing in the library's grand atrium. They used to shimmer with an almost reckless abandon, a carefree dance. Now they seem to drift with a heavier, more purposeful descent, as if weighed down by unseen concerns. Or perhaps you think with a sleepy chuckle, it's just that the cleaning staff are getting less enthusiastic. A small, internal joke, one of many you've cultivated over the years to keep the cerebral gears from grinding too loudly. The whispers begin subtly, carried on the occasional gust of wind that slips through an open window or in the hushed tones of new arrivals to the city. Alexandria, ever a bustling port, has always hummed with the polyglot chatter of merchants, sailors, and scholars from every corner of the known world. But now, amidst the familiar Greek, Egyptian, and Aramaic, you start to hear more Latin. Not just the rough, guttural Latin of the dockworkers, but the crisp, authoritative tones of Roman officials, their cloaks a darker shade of crimson, their sandals striking the cobblestones with a more deliberate, less hurried rhythm. It's like when your favorite streaming service suddenly starts recommending content in a language you don't quite understand, but you know it signifies a global shift. You just hope they don't start dubbing the tragedies of Aeschylus. The market, too, offers its quiet clues. The price of grain, always a barometer of stability in this breadbasket of the ancient world, fluctuates with an unsettling unpredictability. Certain luxury goods, once readily available, become scarcer, or their prices skyrocket. You overhear a frustrated scribe complaining about the cost of imported papyrus from Byblos, muttering darkly about Roman tariffs and unreasonable demands. It's a mundane complaint, yet it carries the weight of something larger, like a tiny crack appearing in a colossal dam. You see more Roman ships in the harbor, their sails emblazoned with the familiar eagle. They're not just trading vessels. Their lines are sharper, their decks bristling with a disciplined order that speaks of military might, not just mercantile ambition. Sometimes you catch glimpses of Roman soldiers marching through the city streets, their armor glinting, their formations tight and intimidating. They move with an air of proprietary confidence, as if they're not merely visitors, but future landlords. It makes you feel a little bit like the quiet neighbor who just wants to read their book, while the new, boisterous family next door keeps throwing loud parties. The scholarly community, usually so focused on deciphering ancient texts or debating philosophical minutiae, also begins to reflect this growing unease. The spirited arguments in the common rooms, once solely about the proper interpretation of a Stoic paradox or the precise calculations for a new astronomical model, now occasionally drift towards the political machinations of the Ptolemaic court. You hear snippets of conversation about the current pharaoh, often a Ptolemy, struggling to maintain their hold on power, increasingly reliant on Roman alliances or, worse, Roman generosity. It's a delicate dance, this balancing act between sovereignty and subservience, and one that often ends with a very heavy foot crushing the toes of the weaker party. This leads to a mainstream historical fact you can't ignore. The Ptolemaic dynasty, which has ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries since Alexander the Great's death, is in a state of terminal decline. Its rulers are often weak, riddled with infighting, and increasingly beholden to the rising power of Rome. While Alexandria remains a jewel, its political independence is slowly but surely eroding, like a grand sculpture weathered by relentless desert winds. You see the signs everywhere if you choose to look beyond the scrolls. The subtle changes in the phrasing of royal decrees, the increasing number of Roman envoys seen entering the palace, the palpable tension in the air whenever news arrives from Rome. There are hushed discussions about specific Roman figures, too. Generals with names that echo across the Mediterranean: Pompey, Caesar, later Antony. Their names are spoken with a mix of awe, fear, and a grudging respect for their military prowess. Scholars, usually content to diagram the intricacies of Euclidean geometry, find themselves discussing the latest Roman civil war, or the strategic implications of a new Roman provincial governor. It's a strange juxtaposition, the eternal truths of mathematics suddenly sharing conversational space with the fleeting, bloody realities of power. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit you pick up from a gossipy librarian over a shared meal of lentils and stale bread concerns the peculiar methods some Ptolemaic rulers employ to appease Rome. Apparently, it's not uncommon for them to literally buy their throne from Roman senators, sending vast sums of Egyptian grain and gold to secure their legitimacy. Imagine having to bribe your way into your own family's kingdom. It puts a whole new spin on paying your dues, doesn't it? It's a testament to how far the once mighty Ptolemaic Empire has fallen, reduced to a glorified tributary state, its rulers more clients than kings. You notice the mood among the library's patrons shifting, too. Fewer wealthy patrons from distant lands seem to be commissioning copies of rare texts. The grand endowments that once flowed freely into the library's coffers, ensuring its continuous expansion and the acquisition of new scrolls, begin to dwindle. The air of boundless optimism that once permeated the library, the sense that knowledge would forever expand and illuminate, now carries a faint undertone of apprehension. It's like watching your favorite indie bookstore slowly lose customers to a massive online retailer. The spirit is still there, but the future feels less certain. Occasionally, a scholar, usually one with strong connections to the court or the city's political elite, will bring in news of a decree that directly impacts the library. Perhaps a reduction in the number of scribes allocated, or a new tax on imported papyrus that makes copying even more expensive. These are not direct assaults, not yet, but they are pinpricks, small wounds that, over time, could bleed the institution dry. You find yourself wondering, with a pang of quiet anxiety, if the meticulous work of preserving knowledge will soon be deemed a luxury, rather than a necessity. Historians still argue whether the Library of Alexandria was truly destroyed by a single catastrophic event, or if its decline was a more gradual process, a slow erosion of funding, political support, and intellectual vitality. You, living through these subtle shifts, begin to understand how the latter might be true. It's not a sudden conflagration you fear, but a slow dimming of the light, a gradual fading into irrelevance as the world outside shifts its priorities. You observe the elder scholars, those who have spent decades within these walls, their faces etched with the wisdom of countless texts. They carry themselves with an increased solemnity, their eyes holding a distant, knowing gaze. They've seen empires rise and fall, philosophies flourish and wither. They understand that even the most enduring monuments to human intellect are not immune to the relentless tides of political change. Their quiet sighs, almost imperceptible, speak volumes about the fragility of even the grandest human endeavors. The very atmosphere within the library, once a serene bubble of pure intellectual pursuit, now seems to breathe with the rhythm of the city's anxieties. The distant sounds of cheering crowds, once merely background noise, now carry an edge of desperation or fervent loyalty to a new political faction. The occasional clatter of armor from a passing patrol outside seems to echo a little louder, a little more ominously, within the hallowed halls. It's as if the world outside, with its messy, unpredictable politics, is pressing in, trying to disrupt the perfect, ordered cosmos of your scholarly life. And honestly, after years of dealing with perfect, ordered cosmoses, a little messiness is fine, but this kind of messiness just feels like extra homework. You find yourself lingering longer in the reading rooms, almost clinging to the familiarity of the scrolls, the comforting scent of ancient wisdom. It's a quiet defiance, a silent protest against the encroaching uncertainty. You immerse yourself deeper in the texts, as if by understanding the past more profoundly, you can somehow prepare for or even deflect the unknown future. The library, your sanctuary, feels more precious than ever, a fragile beacon in a world that seems increasingly prone to chaos. The whispers of changing tides grow louder, not yet a roar, but enough to stir a quiet apprehension in the heart of even the most dedicated scholar. It's funny how time just slips away. One moment you're that wide-eyed newbie, barely able to tell your papyrus from your parchment. Though, let's be real, it was almost always papyrus around here. The next, you're noticing the subtle shift in the light filtering through the high windows, the way the dust motes dance, not just in a single shaft, but in 1,000 tiny sunbeams, illuminating decades of quiet industry. Years have turned into decades, a silent, relentless current flowing through the grand halls of this library, carrying away the eager youth you once were and depositing, well, you, a slightly creakier, perhaps a tad wiser, but certainly no less enthralled version of yourself. Your hair, once a vibrant testament to youthful energy, now boasts streaks of silver that catch the light in a rather distinguished way, if you do say so yourself. And that slight stoop? Oh, that's not age, my friend, that's just the accumulated weight of 1,000 scrolls, each one a universe of thought, pressing gently upon your shoulders. Or perhaps it's just that you've spent so much time hunched over ancient texts, deciphering faded script, that your spine has simply decided to adopt the natural curvature of a particularly well-loved scroll. It's an occupational hazard, really. You find yourself chuckling softly at the thought, a low, rumbling sound that barely disturbs the profound silence of the vast reading rooms. Sometimes you even forget where you left your stylus, only to find it tucked behind your ear, a classic move that confirms you're officially a seasoned scholar, not just a temporary resident. Oh, there it is, you'll mutter, the words barely a whisper. Always the last place you look, isn't it? The faces around you have changed, too. The young scholars who once approached you with deferential awe, seeking guidance on a tricky passage or the precise location of a rare commentary, are now the seasoned mentors themselves, their own silver threads glinting in the soft light. Some of your dearest colleagues, those intellectual sparring partners with whom you debated the finer points of Aristotelian logic or the true meaning of a Homeric epithet, have, alas, moved on. Not just to other research projects, mind you, but to that great, silent library in the sky, where, you hope, all the lost texts are finally reunited. Their absence leaves a quiet ache, a small void in the intellectual tapestry of the library, but their ideas, their contributions, they linger, like the faint scent of old papyrus and dried herbs that always seems to permeate these hallowed halls. You've witnessed the library itself grow, expand, and subtly shift over the years. New acquisitions arrive constantly, vast shipments of scrolls from distant lands, each a testament to the insatiable hunger for knowledge that defines this place. The scribes, bless their diligent hearts, have multiplied, their nimble fingers working tirelessly to copy and recopy, ensuring that even if a scroll were to perish the thought, accidentally fall into the hippopotamus enclosure, it's a long story, don't ask, its wisdom would endure. You've seen entire new wings added, dedicated to burgeoning fields of study, or to house newly translated works from distant empires. It's a living, breathing entity, this library, constantly evolving, much like the very knowledge it contains. And it is this knowledge, its enduring nature, that occupies your thoughts more and more as the decades accumulate. You've seen trends in scholarship come and go, like fashion fads in the bustling Alexandrian marketplace. One decade, everyone is obsessed with astronomy and the celestial spheres. The next, it's all about medicine and the intricacies of the human body. Yet, beneath these shifting currents, the fundamental pursuit of understanding remains. The questions humanity asks, about the universe, about ourselves, about the meaning of existence, they echo across centuries, even millennia. You realize that your own work, those meticulous annotations, the painstaking comparisons of different textual versions, the quiet insights you've unearthed, are but tiny threads in an immense, timeless tapestry. You remember the initial awe, the sense of being overwhelmed by the sheer volume. Now, that feeling has matured into a profound respect, almost a reverence. You've come to understand that no single person can ever truly master it all. It's like trying to drink the entire Mediterranean Sea with a single cup. Honestly, you muse to yourself, I've been here for decades and I still feel like I've only read the table of contents. It's a comforting thought, in a way. It means the journey of discovery is endless. One of the most profound realizations that has settled upon you like the gentle dust of ages is the resilience of ideas. You've seen scrolls that were thought lost, only to reappear years later, sometimes in a remote monastery, sometimes in a private collection. You've even participated in the reconstruction of fragmentary texts, piecing together scattered words and phrases like a grand, intellectual jigsaw puzzle. This process has taught you that knowledge, even when seemingly lost, often finds a way to resurface, to be rediscovered, to be reinterpreted. It's like a deep-rooted plant. Even if its leaves wither, the roots remain, ready to sprout anew when conditions are right. This library, you reflect, has played an unparalleled role in this endurance. It wasn't just a storage facility. It was a workshop, a crucible where knowledge was refined, debated, and systematized. It was here, for instance, that scholars meticulously worked to establish definitive versions of classical Greek texts, often comparing dozens of different manuscripts to arrive at what they believed was the most accurate rendition. This monumental undertaking of textual criticism, a painstaking process of sifting through variations and errors, was crucial in ensuring that the works of Homer, Plato, and Sophocles, to name just a few, were preserved in a relatively consistent form for future generations. Without this foundational work, much of what we know of classical antiquity might have been lost to the whims of individual scribes and the ravages of time. It's a testament to their foresight and dedication, a commitment to intellectual integrity that still resonates through the ages. You've also seen how knowledge can be both incredibly robust and surprisingly fragile. A single fire, a careless hand, a shift in political power, any of these could threaten centuries of accumulated wisdom. Yet, the very act of copying, of translation, of commentary, creates redundancy, multiple pathways for knowledge to survive. It's a bit like an ancient, pre-internet cloud backup system, but made of papyrus and human dedication. You realize that your own quiet contributions, the hours spent verifying a single word, correcting a misplaced accent, or adding a clarifying note, are part of this grand, collective act of preservation. You're a tiny, vital cog in the enormous, intricate machinery of human intellectual endeavor. There's a quiet satisfaction in this realization. You're not a conquering hero, not a famed orator, not even a celebrated philosopher whose name echoes through the agora. You are a scholar, a quiet custodian of wisdom, and your legacy is woven into the very fabric of the scrolls you've touched. You've come to understand that the true enduring nature of knowledge isn't just about the physical scrolls, but about the ideas they contain, the questions they provoke, and the continuous conversation they inspire across generations. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of the Library of Alexandria was more about the preservation of existing knowledge or the active generation of new scientific and philosophical insight. But from your vantage point, having lived within its walls for so long, you see it as a beautiful, symbiotic dance between the two. The preservation enables the generation, and the generation demands new forms of preservation. You recall a curious tidbit you once stumbled upon in an old commentary, a passing mention of how some scholars, particularly those deep in astronomical calculations, would sometimes forget to eat for days, sustained only by the sheer mental energy of their work and perhaps a handful of dried dates. You smile. While you certainly appreciate a good meal, you can relate to that all-consuming focus, that profound sense of timelessness that descends when you're truly lost in a text, when the words on the page become more real than the world outside. It's a peculiar form of monasticism, perhaps, but one where the deity is truth and the rituals are study and contemplation. As the decades continue to pass, you've also noticed the faint, almost imperceptible whispers of changing tides outside the library's grand, protective walls. You hear snippets of conversation from new arrivals, tales of shifting emperors, of distant skirmishes, of new philosophies gaining traction. These are the echoes of Section 16, the subtle hints that the world beyond the library is not as stable as the scrolls within. But for now, within these hallowed halls, the pursuit of knowledge continues, a beacon of light in a world that often seems to be stumbling in the dark. You understand that even the greatest institutions are not immune to the currents of history, but you also understand that the light of knowledge, once kindled, is incredibly difficult to extinguish entirely. It may dim, it may flicker, but it endures. And you, in your quiet way, have been a keeper of that flame. The years have not merely passed, they have settled upon you like the finest, most ancient papyrus dust, accumulating in quiet layers. You feel it in the gentle creak of your knees as you rise from a low stool, in the subtle etchings around your eyes from countless hours squinting at minuscule script, and in the comfortable hum of the library that has become your very heartbeat. Your journey, this profound, silent odyssey through the accumulated wisdom of millennia, now reaches its gentle, inevitable conclusion. You trace a finger along the spine of a scroll, one that, perhaps, you copied yourself decades ago. It's a strange feeling, isn't it? To know that a part of your own life force, your own meticulous effort, is literally bound within these fibers. You aren't just a reader anymore. You are a weaver of the tapestry of knowledge, a silent, almost invisible thread that helps hold it all together. It's a bit like becoming part of the furniture, isn't it? Except you're the furniture that occasionally whispers profound insights to itself. Your annotations, once tentative scribbles in the margins of copies, have now become integral. Younger scholars, their faces still smooth with the eagerness of new discovery, pore over texts that bear your precise, elegant script, your insightful corrections, your nuanced questions. They might not know your name, not truly, but they know your mind. Your quiet observations, the cross-references you painstakingly added, the subtle errors you corrected, these are now part of the library's DNA. Imagine, someone centuries from now, picking up a scroll and thinking, who was this incredibly pedantic yet brilliant person who added this note about the precise number of grains in a specific type of Egyptian sand? That, my friend, is your legacy. You've become a ghost in the machine, a helpful, well-meaning specter of scholarship. And then there are your own works, the treatises you quietly composed, the commentaries you penned, the detailed studies that emerged from your deepest dives into specific subjects. They now sit proudly, if a little dustily, among the works of the ancients. Your name, once a mere whisper in the vast halls, is now etched into the Pinox, the library's monumental cataloging system. For those who don't know, the Pinox were like the world's first comprehensive library catalog, meticulously listing authors, titles, and even the first lines of scrolls. They were a revolutionary organizational feat, an ancient Google search, if you will, just a lot slower and requiring more papyrus. You're in there, right alongside Homer and Euclid. Not bad for someone who just wanted to read in peace. You recall the day your first original work was officially accessioned. There was no fanfare, no grand ceremony. Just a quiet nod from the head librarian, a respectful placement of your scroll in its designated niche. But in that moment, a profound sense of completion washed over you. You had not only consumed knowledge, you had contributed to its ever-expanding river. It was a bit like finally getting your name on the office coffee pot after years of just drinking from it, a true sign of belonging. The young scholars you once mentored, perhaps without even realizing you were doing so, are now the established voices. You see them, debating passionately in the peristyle, their voices echoing with the same youthful fervor you once possessed. They carry forward the torch, perhaps even unknowingly, that you helped ignite. You taught them the silent reverence for the text, the painstaking patience required for true discovery, the gentle art of letting the words speak for themselves. You didn't preach, you exemplified. And in the quiet corners, you might occasionally hear a junior scholar say, "Old, your name's notes on this passage are simply invaluable." It's the highest praise, isn't it? Better than any parade. The library itself, this magnificent intellectual beacon, continues its rhythmic pulse. It has seen empires rise and fall, philosophies bloom and wither, and yet it stands. You've witnessed its resilience, its enduring power to draw minds from across the known world. It's a testament to humanity's insatiable hunger for understanding. Though, it must be said, even the mightiest institutions can sometimes feel the subtle tremors of change. You've heard whispers, seen the occasional, less-than-scholarly official stomping through the halls, and you know that even this sanctuary is not entirely immune to the whims of politics and time. Historians still argue whether the library's ultimate demise was a single, catastrophic blaze or a prolonged, agonizing decay, a slow, sad fade into oblivion. From your vantage point, you've seen the first faint flickers of that long, slow process, the subtle signs that even the greatest light can dim. But that's a thought for another time, perhaps for a less sleepy moment. For now, you focus on the enduring spirit of inquiry. It's what brought you here, what kept you here, and what will continue to animate the minds of those who follow. The pursuit of knowledge, that relentless, beautiful drive to ask questions and seek answers, is truly eternal. It transcends individuals, transcends empires, transcends even the physical scrolls themselves. It lives in the human mind, a flickering flame passed from one generation to the next. You were a diligent keeper of that flame, a quiet guardian of the intellectual hearth. You reflect on the sheer volume of papyrus you've touched, the countless hours spent in quiet contemplation. You've probably inhaled more papyrus dust than any human in history, which, if you think about it, is a rather niche superpower. Perhaps it's why your sneezes are so historically accurate. You smile faintly at the thought. The solitude, once a choice, has become a profound comfort. The silence of the stacks, punctuated only by the rustle of turning pages, the scratching of a quill, or the occasional soft sigh of a fellow scholar lost in thought, has been your truest companion. In this quietude, you found not isolation, but connection, a deep, resonant link to every mind that ever put thought to scroll. Your contribution wasn't loud. It wasn't about grand pronouncements or political maneuvering. It was about the meticulous, the precise, the quiet dedication to truth and understanding. You were a silent architect of knowledge, adding brick by brick to the edifice of human wisdom. You didn't seek fame, you sought clarity. You didn't seek power, you sought truth. And in that pursuit, you found a profound, lasting contentment that many bustling emperors could only dream of. As the final rays of the Alexandrian sun slant through the high windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, forgotten thoughts, you feel a gentle weariness settle over you. It's not the weariness of exhaustion, but the peaceful fatigue of a life fully lived, a purpose completely fulfilled. Your journey concludes not with a flourish, but with a quiet, knowing smile. You have left your mark, not just on the scrolls, but on the very spirit of inquiry that defines this magnificent place. The library, in its silent grandeur, echoes your dedication, a testament to the quiet power of a scholar's life. Now, let the gentle current of the night carry you. Feel the soft, invisible threads of history wrap around you, warm and comforting. The whispers of ancient papyrus, the quiet scratch of a quill, the distant murmur of the sea, they all blend into a lullaby, a soft symphony of the past. Your mind, just like the scholars, has wandered through forgotten halls, touched the dust of ages, and found peace in the quiet pursuit of understanding. Let the knowledge you've absorbed, the images you've conjured, settle gently within you, like the last motes of dust settling in the library at dusk. There is no rush, no urgency, only the soft embrace of rest. The grand halls of the library, now quiet and still, will wait patiently for the dawn, just as your dreams will carry you through the night. The stories are safe, the knowledge preserved, and your journey, for now, is complete. Drift now, on the tranquil currents of sleep, knowing that quiet dedication leaves the most profound and beautiful mark.